The air conditioning in the conference room was blasting, but it couldn't suppress the tense, explosive atmosphere. The pen hovered over the paper, its tip just a centimeter from the 800 million yuan contract. Just as I was about to write, Su Qingwei, seated at the head of the table, suddenly covered her mouth and chuckled softly. Her laughter was both sweet and alluring, sending chills down the spines of the executives below. She gently tapped Xiao Lin, the slightly strapping man in a suit, beside her with her red-nailed fingers, her eyes full of doting. "What's the rush? This contract is just a joke. My Xiao Lin was complaining to me yesterday, saying that President Liu was constantly pressuring him at the company, making him lose face. I'm just trying to appease him." The entire room fell silent. I could feel dozens of eyes instantly fixed on me, some with sympathy, some with schadenfreude, and most with bewilderment. Xiao Lin, with his pale face tilted back, chin held high, deliberately puffed out his chest, the buttons of his suit making his little belly faintly visible, looking like a monkey who had stolen an adult's clothes. I didn't speak, but slowly raised my head and looked at Su Qingwei. I'd been looking at that face for 3 years. To outsiders, she was the ruthless CEO Su, and I was the CEO Liu behind her, living off women. Only I knew how many sleepless nights I'd spent in those 3 years trying to fill the hole left by the Su family and revive this crumbling company. And what did she do? She turned around and treated this newly secured big deal like a bone to toy, throwing it to this useless person who couldn't even understand financial statements. "Mr. Su, this is an 800 million yuan order from Hanhai Group. We negotiated for 7 months, but Mr. Li from the other side only accepts Mr. Liu's proposal." Operations Director Chen's forehead was covered in sweat, his voice trembling. "If we replace him at the last minute, we can't afford the breach of contract penalties, not to mention how we'll be able to maintain our reputation in the industry." "Can't afford to pay?" Su Qingwei scoffed, slowly adjusting her cuffs. The Patek Philippe on her wrist gleamed dazzlingly. "Am I the CEO, or are you?" "I said I can afford to pay, so I can. Liu Chen, you've been working hard at the company these past few years. Perfect. Starting today, you don't need to come to work anymore. Just tell everyone you're unwell and have voluntarily resigned to recuperate. I'm saving you some face." Seeing this, Xiao Lin grew bolder and reached for the contract in front of me, swearing, "Didn't you hear me? I told you to get lost. From now on, you won't be putting on airs in business situations like this. With me here, nothing is more important." I grabbed his outstretched wrist. I didn't use much force, but I could hear his bones cracking. "Let go. How dare you touch me?" Xiao Lin's face instantly turned a deep purplish red as she screamed. "Dirty." I uttered a single word, shaking off his hand, as if throwing away a rag stained with phlegm. Su Qingyue's face darkened completely, a ferocious expression born of defiance. "Liu Chen, have you gone too far? Xiao Lin is my man, try touching a single hair on his head. I'll make sure you can't survive in Jiangxing." "Your people?" I laughed, but the laugh didn't reach my eyes. Su Qingwei, "Some things are better left unsaid. Aren't you afraid of biting off more than you can chew?" Upon hearing this, Su Qingyue's pupils constricted sharply. She understood. Xiao Lin was ostensibly her newly hired assistant, but in reality, he was her heartless father's illegitimate son. No one in the entire company, except for her and me, knew about this relationship. This was why she had been so utterly indulgent towards this younger brother, 5 years her junior. Incest, coupled with the illegitimate son's failed attempt to seize power, if exposed, would ruin the Su family's reputation, and she would lose her position as CEO. But she quickly calmed down, probably thinking I wouldn't dare say it, or that no one would believe me anyway. "Liu Chen, stop spreading alarmist rumors. Now, get out of here right now. I'll sign this contract myself." As she spoke, she reached for the pen in my hand. I didn't dodge. I let her take it, but I placed my hand on the contract. "Sign it yourself?" I shook my head. "Su Qingwei, you probably don't understand the situation. This contract specifically names me, Liu Chen, and it only becomes effective with my signature. Moreover, the licensor of the low-temperature extraction technology involved in the contract is me personally, not the Su Group. In other words, without my signature, you can't obtain the technology license. Without the technology license, it's just a piece of waste paper." These words exploded like a bomb in the conference room. Old Chun and the other senior executives exchanged bewildered glances, their faces filled with shock. They had always assumed this technology was the result of a major breakthrough by the group's R&D department. They never imagined the source was actually Lu Chen. Su Qingyue's expression changed several times. She clearly knew this fact, but had been deliberately ignoring it. Now that I had brought it up in public, her vanity and desire for control were severely challenged. Lu Chen, are you threatening me? She gritted her teeth, her voice squeezed out from between them. I wouldn't dare. I shrugged at a gentle smile that was enough to make anyone hate me. I was simply stating the facts. However, since President Su is in such high spirits today, wanting to use an 800 million contract to please Mr. Lin, then, as his husband, I naturally have to grant his request. Amidst everyone's astonished gazes, I picked up the thick contract and gripped one corner with both hands. You dare. Su Qingyue stood up abruptly, the chair legs scraping against the floor with a screeching sound. I ignored her. I only looked at Xiao Lin, his face that was beginning to contort with terror. Then I tightened my grip on my wrist. Hiss. The crisp, tearing sound was unusually loud in the deathly silent conference room. 1.2.10. That contract worth 800 million and embodying the hard work of countless people would turn into countless scraps of paper in my hands, fluttering down in a flurry. Like an absurd funeral, it buried Su Qingyue's ambition and Xiao Lin's delusional fantasies. Lu Chen, I'm going to kill you. Xiao Lin lunged at me like a madman, but I dodged to the side. He crashed heavily into the corner of the table, screaming in pain. Su Qingyue stood there, her chest heaving, her carefully drawn eyeliner almost smudged by the tears welling up. Her finger trembled as she pointed at me. You're insane. Do you know what this means? 800 million. 800 million. I know. I slowly straightened my perfectly wrinkle-free cuffs, and then leaned down and whispered in Su Qingyue's ear. At this distance, I could smell her strong perfume and feel the trembling emanating from her body. Speaking in a voice only the two of us could hear, I said, word by word. Su Qingyue, I locked the technology patent authorization letter in Xinyuan Capital's safe long ago. As for your shady affair with Xiao Lin, I think if old Master Su, lying in the nursing home, knew that the family business he risked his life to protect was ultimately inherited by such a filthy thing, that his heart condition might not last tonight. Buzz. I felt Su Qingyue's body stiffen instantly, like a stone. I could clearly see a fine layer of cold sweat appearing almost instantly on the back of her fair neck, gathering into a glistening sheen at the edge of her exquisite hairstyle. She turned her head sharply, and her once arrogant eyes were now filled with terror, disbelief, and a hint of desperate pleading. How dare you? Her voice trembled uncontrollably. I didn't give her another chance to speak. I straightened up, glanced at the silent executives, and finally fixed my gaze on Xiao Lin, who was slumped on the ground. A cold smile curled at the corner of my mouth. 3 days. I'm giving your Su group 3 days. Having said that, I looked away from everyone and strode towards the conference room door. Behind them were Su Qingyue's suppressed, tearful gasps, Xiao Lin's furious curses, and Lao Chun and the others' panicked whispers. But I know that this is just the beginning. Stepping out of the building, the afternoon sun was a bit too bright. I took out my phone and dialed a number I'd never used in this city before. The phone rang 3 times before being answered, and a steady, middle-aged male voice came from the other end. Boss. Old Joe, it's happening. I looked at the bustling streets before me, my eyes unfathomable, my target. The Su group. I wanted to disappear from Jiangqing's land within 3 days. Understood. The voice on the other end of the phone showed no hesitation. All of Xinyuan Capital's resources would be mobilized immediately. After hanging up the phone, I hailed a taxi and gave them an address. That place wasn't the Su family villa, nor was it my so-called marital home. That was a world that belonged to Lu Chun, not to the son-in-law of the Su family. Behind me, in the towering building that symbolized the Su family's power, the panic sparked by me was spreading rapidly. Su Qingyue slumped into a chair, her makeup ruined. Her hands trembled as she tried to dial my number, only to find the screen displayed unreachable. Xiao Lin got up, still grumbling incessantly. Sister, don't be afraid of him. He's just a freeloader. Without our family, he's nothing. We need to contact Han Hai right away. I'll go talk to him myself. I refused to believe it. Shut up. Su Qingyue slapped Xiao Lin hard across the face, so hard that he fell to the ground, and half of his face instantly swelled up. Looking at the fool before her, she felt a surge of regret for the first time. She had always thought Lu Chun was a docile dog, but only now did she realize he was a wolf in sheep's clothing. And what terrified her most was the last thing I said. Xinyuan Capital, that legendary behemoth that could control everything, and even the Su family had to look up to and ask for help back then. How could it be Lu Chen's? Quick, get me connected to Chairman Zhou of Xinyuan Capital. No contact headquarters directly. Investigate. Find out Lu Chen's background. Hurry. Su Qingyue screamed hysterically at the secretary outside. But it was all too late. Su Qingyue crawled out from the pile of torn contract scraps. The high heels clattered rapidly and erratically on the gleaming floor, mirroring the pounding of her heart as she teetered on the brink of collapse. She locked herself in the CEO's office bathroom to turn on the tap and repeatedly splashed icy water on her face, trying to extinguish the chill that seeped into her bones. The woman in the mirror had smudged eyeliner, her mascara a smudged mess. Her carefully maintained elegance and arrogance had crumbled, leaving only terror and disarray. Xinyuan Capital, Lu Ken. She shakily pulled out her phone, in no longer the custom-made diamond-encrusted model, but the backup phone she had prepared for certain occasions. She pulled out the number she knew by heart, but had never actually dialed. The private number of Zhou Mu, the Asia-Pacific president of Xinyuan Capital. Beep. Every busy signal felt like a hammer blow to her heart. She had to connect. If she could get in touch with Xinyuan, if she could explain things clearly, there was still a chance to salvage the situation. The 800 million contract could be torn up and reneged on. But if they angered Xinyuan, this true Yamat, the Su family would be doomed. Hello. The call finally connected. And the voice on the other end was calm and composed, yet carried a natural sense of pressure. Mr. Zhou. Mr. Zhou. Hello. I'm Su Qingyue from the Su Group. Su Qingyue almost shouted, her voice trembling with a fawning tone. I'm so sorry to bother you. It's about the Hanhai project. And my Lu Chen. No. It was me. I was just confused for a moment. I was joking with you. A joke? Zhou Mu's voice turned cold. President Su, Xinyuan's time is precious. He doesn't have time to listen to your childish explanations about your marital relationship. I only have one question. Is Lu Chen with you? He just left. Just now. Su Qingyue asked anxiously. Chairman Zhou. Is Lu Chen with you? Please help me persuade him to come back. I'll apologize to him. There was a few seconds of silence on the other end of the phone. Followed by a very soft, mocking laugh. An apology? Su Qingyue, don't you understand the situation yet? Lu Chen needs your apology? Zhou Mu's tone suddenly turned stern. Let me tell you. From this moment on. All cooperation between Xinyuan Capital and the Su Group is permanently terminated. All credit lines. Guarantees. And ongoing mergers and acquisitions are halted. Also. Let me remind you. Keep an eye on your assistant, Xiao Lin. And don't let him cause any trouble he shouldn't. Otherwise, if the Su Group collapses too quickly, I'm afraid Lu Chun will find it boring. Beep. The busy tone is like a death knell. Su Qingyue slumped to the ground, her phone slipping from her hand. A permanent termination? A complete halt? This was tantamount to ripping out the lifeblood of the Su Group. Which of those ongoing projects didn't require Xinyuan's financial support? Which of those bank loans wasn't backed by Xinyuan's implicit guarantee? No, impossible, she muttered to herself, then suddenly jumped up and rushed back to her desk, frantically typing on the keyboard and logging into the company's internal system. The data that came into view made her dizzy. The group's stock price plummeted by more than 15% in just half an hour, but with a sell-off on the trading floor like a burst dam. The CFO's phone was ringing off the hook with calls from debt collectors and inquiries about the cash flow. Even worse, several crucial raw material purchase orders were unilaterally canceled by suppliers one after another, all citing unfavorable risk assessments. All of this happened too fast and too precisely, as if an invisible hand had already laid a net in the dark, it just waiting for her to tear the last thread. And she really did lie. Lu Chen, you madman. Su Qingyue's eyes were bloodshot. She grabbed a crystal ornament from the table and smashed it to the ground, shards flying everywhere. What have I done to wrong you? I gave you a life of luxury that I let you enjoy a comfortable life with a nominal position at the company. I. Her words came to an abrupt halt. She suddenly recalled the terrifyingly calm look in Lu Chen's eyes when he tore up the contract, and the words he whispered in her ear about Xiao Lin. About that secret she thought only heaven. Earth that you. And I knew. Did he already know? Did he know that Xiao Lin was her half-brother, that they had a secret affair. And even knew more? For example, that the reason her father agreed to her marrying Lu Chen wasn't just for money, but also because Lu Chen possessed a document that could prove Xiao Lin's existence and threaten her inheritance rights. A chill ran up her spine from her tailbone to the top of her head. If Lu Chen were to really reveal all this, that not only would she lose the company, but she wouldn't even have the right to stand on her own 2 feet in Jiangqing's high society. Her father would be furious, the family's reputation would be ruined, and she would go from being the envied CEO Su to a despised harlot. No, I can't just sit here and wait to die. Su Qingyue forced herself to calm down, her nails digging deep into her palms, leaving several crescent-shaped bloody marks. She grabbed the intercom. Connect me to the legal department. Draft a lawyer's letter immediately. Accusing Lu Chen of maliciously damaging important company business documents and stealing trade secrets. Also, send people to find him. Even if we have to turn Jiangxing upside down, we have to bring him back to me. As she frantically issued these doomed orders, Liu Chen sat in the back seat of a taxi heading towards the city's old town. The scenery outside the car window gradually changed from towering buildings to weathered old alleyways. My phone vibrated, and an encrypted message popped up. The target has activated its emergency response plan and is searching for your whereabouts. The first wave of Shenyuan's offensive has been effective. Su's stock price triggered a circuit breaker, and banks have begun withdrawing loans. A further sharp drop is expected when the market opens tomorrow. Also, there are preliminary leads regarding the matter you requested. After reading the message, Liu Chen deleted it. He looked up as the taxi stopped in front of an old building with a sign that read 9 KT Restaurant. The stairwell was dark and damp, the walls were peeling, and the air was thick with the smell of cooking oil and mildew. This was one of Jiangqing's notorious slums, a place Su Qingyue would never have imagined he would come to. Following the address and the text message, he found a small room on the top floor. The door was ajar, and he pushed it open and went inside. The room was dimly lit and simply furnished with only a bed, a table, and a chair. A young woman wearing faded denim and with her long hair casually tied in a ponytail was squatting on the floor with her back to him, cooking something in a small pot. Hearing the noise, she didn't turn around, but spoke softly, her voice clear and cold, with a barely perceptible hoarseness. Close the door. It smells awful, but I don't have any air fresheners here. Lu Chen closed the door behind him and sized up the woman named Ju. In the photo, she was Su Qingyuan. Su Qingyue's younger sister, who was said to have died young. But standing before him now was a woman with sharp, piercing eyes exuding a world weariness and hatred beyond her years. Ajio. Lu Chen called out this name. The woman slowly stood up and turned around. Her face was clean and without any makeup, yet one could see a resemblance in her features to Su Qingyue, only lacking Su Qingyue's spoiled nature and possessing more resilience and melancholy. She held a small folding knife in her hand, casually peeling a potato. Lu Chen, or rather, Mr. Lu of Qinyuan. A Jew twitched the corners of her mouth, the smile not reaching her eyes. Su Qingyue thought you were a useless son-in-law, but she didn't even know half of your background. However, the fact that you came here means you believed what I said in the text message. I need to verify. Lu Chen walked to the table, pulled out the creaky chair opposite him, and sat down. It was about Xiao Lin, about how old Master Su favored his illegitimate son back then, and even tried to depose your mother and make Xiao Lin's mother his official wife, and also about my mother's formula being stolen. A Jew stopped peeling potatoes. She suddenly looked up, and 2 dark flames instantly ignited in her clear black and white eyes as she stared intently at Lu Chen as if trying to find any trace of deception on his face. So you really knew, she said softly, her tone carrying an almost twisted sense of pleasure. You even know who drove my mother to her death? I know more than that. Lu Chen's tone was calmed, but every word was piercing. I also know that back then to cover up the scandal. Old Master Su fabricated the illusion of your death and sent you to an orphanage. Later, someone tried to eliminate you completely, but you escaped on your own and struggled like a rat at the bottom of the city for 10 years. And Su Qingyue, she not only knew about it, but she even participated in bullying you because she hated your mother and hated that you took away her father's attention. The knife in a Jew's hand clattered onto the table. She bit her lower lip hard until she tasted blood. 10 years of forbearance, 10 years of hatred. They were casually revealed by the man before her, tearing open a wound that had long since scabbed over but was still bleeding. What do you want? Her voice was hoarse. Help me kill them? Or use me to deal with that bitch Su Qinghua? Murder is the worst option. Lu Chen shook his head. What I want is for them to lose everything. To slowly taste the pain you suffered back, then amidst betrayal and condemnation from everyone. And you, a Jew. Or rather Su Qingyuan. What you need to do is not just seek revenge, but also reclaim what should have been yours. What your mother took away from you. He pulled a thin folder from his pocket and pushed it in front of a Jew. Here are photocopies of some of the share certificates left by your mother. Although most of them were embezzled by the Su family, they are enough to prove your inheritance rights. Also, there is some evidence about Xiao Lin's embezzlement of public funds and falsification of accounts. And Lu Chun paused, his eyes sharp, and pointed to the location of the backup video footage of his relationship with Su Qinghua. A Jew opened the folder with trembling hands. Looking at the yellowed papers and clear words, tears streamed down her face without warning. Not from sadness, but from a belated, twisted surge of emotion. She looked up, her eyes regaining their previous sharpness, even colder than before. What do you want me to do? It's very simple. Lu Chen stood up, looking down at her. Tomorrow, the Su group will hold an emergency board meeting. I need you to be in the meeting room at the most crucial moment. Not as the beggar Jude, but as Su Qingyuan, the second young lady of the Su family, bringing these gifts to surprise your sister and brother. He walked to the door, stopped, and didn't turn around. Remember, a Jew, your hatred is your weapon. But my plan is your battlefield. Don't disappoint me. The door closed softly. Ajio sat alone in the dimly lit room, looking at the documents in her hand. A slow, chilling smile spread across her lips. In that smile, there was madness, the pleasure of revenge, and a burgeoning vitality. Su Qinghua, Xiao Lin, and that rotten house. She muttered these names under her breath, as if chanting a spell. The show is finally about to begin. Meanwhile, the Su group building. Su Qinghua had just finished a fruitless board meeting. The shareholders' questions and accusations nearly overwhelmed her. She forced herself back to her office, only to receive even worse news. The people sent to find Lu Chun hadn't even caught a glimpse of him. Instead, they seemed to have been warned and had all retreated. Useless. A bunch of useless people. She threw the pen in her hand hard, smashing it against the expensive mahogany door, splattering ink everywhere. Just then, the internal phone rang. It was the receptionist, her voice filled with panic. Mr. Su, there's a girl named Ju outside the door. She says she's your sister. Su Qingyuan, and wants to see you. Su Qingyue's hand, which was touching up her makeup, suddenly trembled, and the powder compact fell onto the table with a clatter. Su Qingyuan, that younger sister who died long ago? She abruptly stood up, her heart feeling as if it were being gripped tightly by an invisible hand, making it almost impossible to breathe. Lu Chun was already giving her a massive headache, and now a sister who was supposedly dead had appeared? What exactly is going on? She suppressed the turmoil in her heart and spoke into the microphone, her voice dry and cold. Let her in. I want to see which blind liar dares to impersonate my sister. She walked to the office door and looked in the direction of the elevator. An unprecedented, impending doom premonition, like an icy tide, completely overwhelmed her. The morning sunlight failed to dispel the gloom inside the Su group building. Su Qinghua hadn't slept all night, and even expensive eye cream couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes. She sat behind her large desk, listening to the chief financial officer's trembling report. Overnight fluctuations in international futures commodity prices had caused significant losses on Su's hedging positions, and the bank had just issued an ultimatum. If the margin wasn't replenished by 10 a.m., the positions would be forcibly liquidated. Close the position? They dare. Su Qingyue slammed her hand on the table, making the coffee cup rattle. She told President Li, I'll see him this afternoon. As for Xin Yuan, I'll take care of Xin Yuan. Ask them for 2 more days' grace. The CFO, with a distressed expression, said, President Su, regarding Xin Yuan. Chairman Zhou said it's a permanent termination of the cooperation, with no room for leniency. Moreover, the other partner banks, upon hearing that Xin Yuan is withdrawing its investment, have also tightened their lending. We're now facing a liquidity crunch. Liquidity depletion. These words pierced Su Qingyue's ears like icicles. She knew what it meant. A broken cash flow, and the vast Su family empire would collapse in an instant. Just then, the office door was flung open, and Xiao Lin rushed in, her usual smugness gone, replaced by terror. Sister, something terrible has happened. Something terrible has happened. My cards have all been frozen. And some strangers just came to my villa saying they're acting on behalf of the court to seize it. They said I'm suspected of money laundering and embezzlement. Su Qingyue's head buzzed, and she nearly lost her balance. She gripped the edge of the table, her fingernails digging almost into the wood. The properties and luxury cars she had bought for Xiao Lin, and the accounts used for his extravagant spending. Many of their origins were less than honorable. Much of it had been embezzled from the group's accounts through complex financial maneuvers abusing her position. Normally, with her around, no one dared to investigate, but now. Who investigated this? Su Qingyue's voice was shrill. No, I don't know, but their paperwork is complete. Sister, what should I do? They'll arrest me. I don't want to go to jail. Xiao Lin was so frightened that her face turned pale, tears streaming down her face. She was completely different from the elite demeanor she usually put on, looking like a dog whose tail had been stepped on. Shut up. Su Qingyue snapped, giving him a fierce glare. This good-for-nothing, what can he do besides cry in a pinch? But she couldn't deal with him right now. A more pressing question loomed before her. Who was behind all this? Lu Chen. Where did he get such power to mobilize the judicial and financial sectors in just a few hours to precisely target Xiao Lin? Unless he really had that behemoth, Xin Yuan, standing behind him. The thought of Xin Yuan sent chills down Su Qingyue's spine. She forced herself to calm down, her mind racing. She had to stabilize the situation. First, she had to secure today's board meeting. The shareholders couldn't be allowed to know the company was on its last legs. Second, she had to find Lu Chen. No matter the method, as long as he relented, as long as Xin Yuan was willing to reinvest, there was still a chance. Finally, the matter concerning Xiao Lin had to be suppressed. She absolutely couldn't let him go in and make baseless accusations. Listen, Su Qingyue took a deep breath, but trying to make her voice sound calm. Go home right now, and don't go anywhere. No matter who asks, say you're my personal assistant, that all the expenses were approved by me, and that we'll talk about the accounts later. I'll find the best lawyer to handle this. As for those properties, let them be frozen for now. It's better than them being forcibly auctioned off. Understand? Xiao Lin nodded, seemingly understanding, and was about to say something when the office intercom rang urgently again. It was the board secretary. President Su, all the directors have arrived. An emergency meeting is about to begin. Please come immediately. Su Qingyue closed her eyes, suppressing her agitation and fear. She picked up her Hermes bag from the table and quickly touched up her makeup in front of the mirror, but trying to maintain her composed and capable appearance. She gave Xiao Lin a wink. You stay here and don't come out. Wait for me to come back from the meeting. After speaking, she straightened her back, with a kind of pride that came with exhaustion, pushed open the door, and walked towards the boardroom at the end of the corridor. The atmosphere in the conference room was heavy. Around the long conference table, several core directors sat with somber expressions. Upon seeing Su Qingyue enter, they merely nodded coldly, offering no even a token of politeness. The seat next to Su Qingyue's that usually reserved for Lu Chen was now conspicuously empty. Everyone's here, let's begin the meeting. Su Qingyue sat down, trying to keep her voice steady. I've called you all here today mainly to discuss the current financial situation and market rumors. I assure you that everything is under control. Before she could finish speaking, she was interrupted by the most senior director with gray hair. President Su, that it's under control? The stock price has plummeted. The banks are withdrawing loans. The suppliers are cutting off supplies. Hanhai's project has fallen through. And now there are even rumors in the market that our group is suspected of major financial irregularities. Is this what you call under control? Another director immediately followed up. Yes.Mr. Suit where is Vice President Lu Chun? At a time like this, why isn't he attending the meeting as Executive Vice President? Yesterday, he publicly tore up the contract. His behavior was suspicious. Has the company taken any action against him? We must be responsible to our shareholders. Lu Chun has already resigned. Su Qinghue instinctively labeled Lu Chen's actions, but trying to distance herself from the situation. He was emotionally unstable and acted in ways that harmed the company's interests. We are pursuing legal action against him. As for the financial issues, it was entirely an overreaction by the market. I am actively coordinating with all parties involved. Coordinate? How? Go find Shin Yuan. The first senior director to speak sneered, pulled a piece of paper from his folder, and shoved it in front of Su Qinghue. President Su, take a look at this. This is the lawyer's letter we received this morning, from Xinyuan Capital. They formally notified us that they are revoking all patented technologies authorized for use by the Su Group and demanding that we immediately cease use and compensate for losses. Without these technologies, how will we produce? How will we make a profit? Tell me, how do you plan to coordinate this situation? Su Qinghue's face turned deathly pale. Revoking the patent. This was the real solution. Trembling, she picked up the paper. The official seal was a glaring red, the terms cold and ruthless. It was over. Everything was over. Without the core technology, the Su Group was just an empty shell. The meeting room was filled with discussion, and the accusations and doubts grew louder. Su Qinghue felt isolated and helpless, as if she had been stripped naked and thrown into the freezing cold. Just as the situation was about to spiral out of control, the conference room door was gently pushed open. All eyes turned to that direction. It wasn't the secretary who came in, nor was it Lu Chun. Instead, she was a young woman dressed in simple denim, with her long hair tied in a ponytail and no makeup on her face. She walked steadily, her eyes cold, and went straight to the conference table. Under Su Qinghue's horrified gaze, she pulled out Lu Chen's empty seat and sat down calmly. Who are you? Who let you in? Su Qinghue screamed, as if she had seen a ghost. The woman slowly raised her head, revealing a face that bore a 6 or 7-point resemblance to Su Qinghue, yet was even more strikingly beautiful and aloof. She glanced around at the bewildered board members, her voice not loud, but clearly reaching everyone's ears. Hello everyone, let me introduce myself. My name is Su Qinghue. As far as I know, none of you here have ever seen me before. After all, I was pronounced dead from illness 20 years ago. Su Qinghue. The name struck like a thunderbolt in the conference room. Several of the older directors paled instantly. Some of them knew about the scandal involving the Su family years ago. Old Master Su's early affair, the illegitimate daughter born from which she was said to have died young. They never imagined she was still alive. Su Qinghue's face couldn't be described as pale, it was practically ashen. She stared intently at Su Qinghue, her lips trembling, but no sound came out. She thought of Lu Chen's warning yesterday, the mysterious text message, and Agio. So, Agio was Su Qinghue. Lu Chun had arranged all of this long ago. You're talking nonsense. Su Qinghue is long dead. You're an imposter. Su Qinghue suddenly stood up, pointing at Su Qinghue and screaming, trying to maintain her last shred of dignity. Security. Tell security to throw her out. Sister, don't rush to deny it. Su Qinghue calmly took out an old file folder from her canvas bag, pulled out several yellowed photocopies and a beautifully bound document, and laid them flat on the table. This is my birth certificate, with my father's name on it. This is the death certificate issued by the hospital back then. After examination, the signature and seal showed signs of forgery. And this is the share transfer agreement left by my mother, clearly stating that she was giving me 5% of the Su Group shares under her name. She paused, her gaze sweeping over the directors with their varied expressions, finally settling on Su Qinghue's face, contorted with extreme fear. A cold smile curved her lips. Of course, compared to these, I think you directors are probably more interested in another gift I've brought. She picked up the beautifully bound document and gently pushed it to the center of the table. This is the detailed evidence I commissioned from a private investigator that compiled over several years that regarding Ms. Su Qingwei, the current president of the Su Group, and her special assistant, Mr. Kobayashi, who have embezzled huge sums of public funds that engaged in fraudulent transactions and misappropriated company assets over the past 3 years. This includes, but is not limited to, a list of luxury homes and cars purchased by Mr. Kobayashi with public funds, and she paused deliberately, enunciating each word clearly, the improper and morally reprehensible intimate relationship between Ms. Su Qingwei and Mr. Kobayashi, along with some video footage and hotel records. Whoosh. The meeting room erupted in chaos. Embezzlement. Fictitious transactions. Improper relationship. The last piece of news in particular that was a bombshell. Su Qingwei and Xiao Lin. The Xiao Lin that Su Qingwei introduced as a distant relative? This news was explosive. The director's eyes lit up instantly. This wasn't just a matter of poor management. It was a criminal offense and a scandal. The Su Group stock price was going to plummet. Noted IT was going to be completely finished. Slander. It's all slander. Su Qingwei completely broke down. She lunged forward to snatch the documents, but was calmly blocked by the board member beside her. She turned and pointed at Su Qingwan, her voice shrill and shattered. She's a fake. She's a con man hired by Lu Chun. Her goal is to take everything from the Su family. Don't believe her. Lu Chun. Where's Lu Chun? Make him come out. Make him confront you face to face. A confrontation? A calm and familiar male voice rang out at the conference room door. Everyone looked again. Lu Chun had appeared there at some point. He had changed out of his usual suit and tie and was now wearing a well-made dark gray casual shirt. His hands were in his pockets, his posture relaxed, yet he exuded an invisible pressure. He didn't look at anyone. His gaze swept over the crowd and landed on Su Qingwan. He nodded slightly. Qingwan, you've worked hard. That clear and gentle voice completely confirmed Su Qingwan's identity. Su Qingwei was struck dumb, frozen on the spot, tears and snot streaming down her face, her carefully styled hair falling loose, making her look like a madwoman. Lu Chun then slowly walked into the conference room, as if this were not the battlefield where the fate of the Su family would be decided, but his backyard. He walked to Su Qingwan's side and stood naturally beside her, his gaze sweeping over the directors present, finally settling on Su Qingwei, whose face was ashen. Mr. Su, no need to look anymore, I'm here. Lu Chun's voice was calm and even. However, he explained I'm here now as a special advisor to Chunyuan Capital to take over the affairs of the Su Group. Given the Su Group's current severe operational crisis, financial loopholes, and moral hazard among management, Chunyuan Capital, in conjunction with major creditor banks, has applied to the court for temporary receivership. Of course, this is on the premise that we will protect the rights of legitimate shareholders. He glanced at Su Qingwan. Take over? What right do you have to take over? Su Qingwei roared, lunging forward to grab Lu Chun, but was politely but firmly stopped by two security personnel who had appeared at the door at some unknown time. Based on this, Lu Chun pulled a document stamped with a bright red seal from his pocket and displayed it to everyone. It was an authorization letter from the largest creditor of the Su Group, and the right of Chunyuan Capital to dispose of the mortgaged assets of the Su Group. Also, let me remind you, Mr. Sued that I have already filed a report with the police regarding your amusing anecdote with Mr. Lin. And the specific flow of the misappropriated funds. I think you can explain it to us slowly at the police station in the coming days. Having said that, he didn't look at Su Qingwei again, but turned to the board members, his tone reverting to its usual businesslike indifference. Distinguished directors, the transition between the old and new administrations is inevitably chaotic, but Chunyuan Capital will stabilize the situation as soon as possible. As for Ms. Su Qingwan's inheritance rights, we will verify and handle it according to the law. Now, please leave. We need to inventory the assets and documents. The board members exchanged bewildered glances. Ultimately, faced with the overwhelming power of Chunyuan Capital and Lu Chun's cold demeanor, they chose to silently rise and leave. This farce had to end. Su Qingwei was being held by two security guards, struggling like a dehydrated fish, uttering unintelligible sobs, her eyes staring blankly at Lu Chun filled with resentment, fear, and a final trace of unwillingness. Lu Chen walked up to her, looking down at his once high and mighty wife, and slowly spoke, his voice so low only the two of them could hear. Su Qingwei, I said 3 days. The first day, the contract was torn up in shock. The second day, a hidden move turned the tables. Today, the third day, the backlash of bloodlines. How does it feel? From this day forward, that you will lose everything, including your name, including your dignity. And you and your good brother Xiao Lin will slowly savor today's lesson in prison. After saying that, he straightened up and waved to the security personnel. Take them away. Don't get the carpet dirty. Su Qingwei was dragged out, and her sharp cries and curses gradually faded away, eventually disappearing into the empty conference room. Lu Chen turned around and looked at Su Qingwan, who had been sitting quietly. Her face was expressionless, but in her clear, cold eyes, there was finally a trace of relief and a deep-seated weariness. Well done, Lu Chen said. Su Qingwan looked up at him. What's next? Will I be able to take back everything that belongs to me? What belongs to you will naturally be returned to you. Lu Chen walked to the head seat and sat down at the same seat Su Qingwei had just been sitting in. But the Su group was already a mess. Xin Yuan took over to cut losses and clean things up. Your mother's shares will be returned. But the company's management rights will not be delegated in the short term. You can join the board of directors and exercise supervisory power. As for the rest, we'll talk about it when you're ready. Su Qingwan remained silent for a moment, then nodded. She knew that Lu Chen was not a savior. He was merely a pawn. But she didn't care. As long as she could see Su Qingwei fall, as long as she could get back what her mother deserved, she was willing to be a puppet. Lu Chen, she suddenly asked, why did you help me? Just to deal with Su Qingwei? Lu Chen did not answer immediately. He looked out the window. The sunlight was just right, but it couldn't penetrate the depths of his eyes. Because my mother's recipe was initially discovered by your mother by chance, who then alerted my father to protect it. And also because he paused out a barely perceptible tremor in his voice, that Su Qingwei didn't deserve all of this. And some people need to learn how to reclaim what's theirs, instead of forever hiding in the shadows. Su Qingwan paused, seemingly understanding something, yet also seemingly not. But she didn't press the matter further. Silence returned to the conference room. Only the faint sounds of the city outside the window could be heard. The era of the Su group has officially come to an end at this moment. Lu Chen's story has only just begun. He looked at the investigation document about Su Qingwan on the table, as well as another briefing about the abnormal fund flows in Xiao Lin's overseas accounts, his eyes turning slightly cold. Xiao Lin thinks she can escape? Not so easy. And behind Su Qingwei, there's that old fox, old Master Su, who's been lurking in the shadows, instigating his daughter's evil deeds, and might even be after Lu Chen's mother's formula. The game is far from over. Old Zhou, Lu Chen whispered into the miniature headset. Yes, young master. Keep an eye on Kobayashi. If he leaves the country, deal with him immediately without asking for permission. Also, arrange for me to go to the sanatorium. I should go see my father-in-law. Clear. Lu Chen stood up, walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, and looked down at the business empire that was about to change hands. The sunlight cast a long shadow of him, covering the entire logo of the Su group. The 3-day deadline has passed. The reckoning has only just begun. Nestled among evergreen trees on a hillside in the western suburbs of Wuhan, that the Jing'an Sanatorium has always been a preferred retreat for the powerful and wealthy, a place to conceal their vices or enjoy their retirement. The VIP villas here are heavily guarded, and entry is restricted to those with prior appointments. A black Bentley Mulsanne, without any markings, smoothly drove in. The security guard at the gate glanced at the license plate and immediately saluted before letting it pass. Inside the CAR. Liu Chen closed his eyes to rest, his fingertips tapping the armrest absently. Old Zhou, sitting in the passenger seat, observed his young master's expression through the rearview mirror and reported in a low voice. Young master, Grandpa Su checked on him this morning. His vital signs are relatively stable, but his consciousness fluctuates between lucidity and confusion. As for Xiao Lin, her flight is at 3:10 p.m., heading towards the Mekong River. We've already made arrangements for any unforeseen circumstances. Lu Chen didn't even lift his eyelids, only giving a faint hum. That hum revealed neither joy nor anger, yet it instantly lowered the atmosphere in the car. Old Joe stopped talking and focused on driving. The car stopped in front of a small white building covered in ivy. The two guards at the door, seeing Lu Chun, bowed respectfully, as if they had been notified. Mr. Lu. Lu Chun got out of the car, but didn't go inside immediately. Instead, he looked up at the second-floor window with its heavy curtains drawn. That was where Su Jinhua, Su Qingwei, and Su Qingwan's father, the true head of the Su group, was. What was he doing in there? Lu Chen asked the head nurse beside him, a shrewd and capable-looking middle-aged woman wearing gold-rimmed glasses. Mr. Su had taken a nap this morning and had just woken up. He was looking at old photos. The supervisor adjusted his glasses, speaking professionally, but Mr. Lu, the old man, seemed a bit agitated today, constantly repeating the formula, and I'm sorry. We gave him a sedative. He should be calmer now. The recipe. I'm sorry. Lu Chen chewed on these two words, a cold smile curving his lips. It seemed Su Jinhua wasn't entirely oblivious. At least in his lucid moments, his conscience would occasionally torment him. Unfortunately, this belated remorse couldn't change any of the facts. Lu Chen stepped into the small building. The room was dimly lit, filled with a faint smell of disinfectant mixed with old paper. The stairs were covered with a thick carpet, making no sound underfoot. Old Joe remained in the living room on the first floor, like a silent guardian. Pushing open the bedroom door on the second floor, an even stronger smell of medicine wafted out. The room was simply furnished with only a medical bed and various monitoring instruments emitting regular beeping sounds. On the bed, Su Jinhua, emaciated, sat leaning against the raised headboard, clutching a photo album in his hand, staring blankly out the window, muttering something indistinctly. Hearing the door open, he slowly turned his head. His cloudy eyes seemed to brighten for a moment when he saw Lu Chun, but then quickly dimmed again. He continued to look out the window, as if the person in front of him was less worthy of attention than the scenery outside the window. Father-in-law. Lu Chun pulled out a chair next to the bed, sat down, his voice steady and emotionless. He looked quite well today. Su Jinhua ignored him, still muttering. The formula that can't be given. Qingwei doesn't understand. Lu Chen stared at him quietly for a while before slowly speaking. It seems you're not completely muddle-headed. You know Su Qingwei doesn't understand, but do you? Do you understand how you tricked my mother out of the core parameters of that low-temperature extraction technology back then? Su Jinhua's body trembled violently, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the photo album. He finally reacted, slowly turning his eyes to look at Lu Chen again, this time with a clear fear and panic in his eyes. Lu Chen? It's me. Lu Chen leaned forward slightly, closing the distance between them. His voice was low, but each word was clear. I'm not here to hear your confession. Confession is useless. I'm here to tell you that the game is over. Su Qingyue is finished. Xiao Lin has run away, and the Su group is mine now. No, impossible. Su Jinhua's voice was hoarse like a broken gong, with a rattling sound, as if his trachea was blocked by phlegm. Qingwei, she is your wife? Xiao Lin is. Xiao Lin is your illegitimate child with that woman, and also Su Qingyue's lover, right? Lu Chen interrupted him, his tone full of sarcasm. You've hidden this filth for so many years, thinking it was foolproof? Too bad, the truth will out. And guess what? Su Qingwan is back. This morning at the board meeting, she produced her birth certificate and shareholding agreement from back then. Guess what expressions those directors had? Oh, and right, there were also those amazing video clips of her, Su Qingwei, and Xiao Lin. TSK, truly mind-blowing. Qingwan, she's still alive? A complex expression flickered across Su Jinhua's previously ashen face, a mixture of shock, elation, and a deeper fear. No, it's impossible, the doctor said back then. The doctor from back then took your money, and he also took my mother's money. Lu Chen said coldly. The one who survived was Qingwan. The one who died was the lie you fabricated. Just like that formula you switched out. Su Jinhua coughed violently, a cough that seemed to tear his heart out. The nurse rushed in to check on him, but was stopped by a glance from Lu Chen. He waited until Su Jinhua was too weak to cough anymore before continuing. You now have two choices. First, continue to play dumb, watch helplessly as the Su family falls into complete ruin. Su Qingwei and Xiao Lin spend their lives in prison. And Su Qingwan, it because of your past heartlessness, I will never acknowledge you as her father. Second, wake up, cooperate with me, and complete all the evidence chains related to the stolen formula to solidify the evidence that your precious daughter Su Qingwei embezzled funds and colluded with Xiao Lin to transfer assets. This way, at least we can ensure that Su Qingwan can smoothly inherit her mother's shared. The Su family line won't end. And you can leave in peace. Su Jinhua stared intently at Lu Chun, his chest heaving violently, his cloudy eyes filled with struggle. He certainly didn't want the Su family to be ruined, much less be condemned and cursed after his death. Su Qingwan's survival was an unexpected and wonderful surprise that his only weakness and hope now. But to have him testify against his own daughter, aren't you afraid I'll expose everything? Including your mother. And the secrets of her organization. Su Jinhua suddenly threatened viciously, making a last-ditch effort. Lu Chen laughed, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. It was icy and chilling. Tell it out? Do you think you still have that chance? He paused, his tone carrying an undeniable authority. That's something you don't even have the right to pry into. You just need to remember that every bit of cooperation you show now is paving the way for Su Qingwan. Otherwise, I don't mind letting Su Qingwan believe that you not only abandoned her and her mother back then, but were even indirectly responsible for her mother's death. These words struck Su Jinhua squarely at his Achilles' heel. His body stiffened. All his struggle and threats vanished instantly, leaving only endless despair and dejection. He knew Lu Chen meant what he said. This son-in-law, whom he had once regarded as a live-in son-in-law, whom he could manipulate at will, was now a true tyrant wielding the power of life and death. After a long silence, the Su Jinhua uttered a single word with extreme difficulty, almost inaudibly. Okay. Lu Chen stood up, straightened his cuffs, as if he had just closed a trivial deal. A wise choice. The lawyer will be here soon. You need to sign some documents. Also, enjoy your final moments of peace, father-in-law. Soon, you'll be able to go to the underworld and personally apologize to my mother. After saying that, he didn't look at Su Jinhua again and turned to leave. Behind him, Su Jinhua's suppressed sobs like those of a dying wild beast could be heard. As he came downstairs, old Zhou greeted him and whispered, "Young master, news from the airport. Xiao Lin's flight is delayed due to mechanical failure. He's currently stuck in the first-class lounge. Very agitated. And is on the phone yelling at people." Lu Chun continued walking. A cruel smile playing on his lips. Mechanical malfunction? Very well. Let him wait a little longer. Let him fully experience the anxiety of falling from heaven to hell. Also, inform Su Qingwan that Su Jinhua is willing to cooperate in collecting evidence, so she can prepare to take over a portion of the shares. And tell her that some of her mother's belongings are with me. I can show them to her. Yes. Stepping out of the small building, the afternoon sun was somewhat dazzling. Lu Chen squinted, looking at the city's silhouette below the distant mountains. The old era of the Su family was being completely buried, and the establishment of a new era often requires some bloody sacrifices. Xiao Lin was the first. Su Qingwei was the second. As for Su Jinhua, he was merely an observer awaiting the final judgment in this reckoning. Lu Chen took out his phone and dialed an encrypted number. It rang for a long time before being answered. A wary and uneasy female voice came through. It was Su Qingwan. Lu Chen. Her voice sounded more tired than it had been in the conference room that morning. It's me. Lu Chen's tone was calm. Your father has woken up and wants to see you. Also, I have some leads regarding your mother's inheritance. See you at the usual place at 8 o'clock tonight. There was a few seconds of silence on the other end of the phone. Then Su Qingwan took a deep breath and said, Okay. I'll be there on time. Hanging up the phone, Lu Chen put it back in his pocket. The prey was in the net. Now it was time to close it. Xiao Lin's accident, Su Qingyue's breakdown, Su Jinhua's testimony, Su Qingwan's return. All the clues pointed to the same destination. He got back into the car and said to Lao Zhou, Go back to the company. While you're at it, send a bottle of good wine to the sanatorium as a token of my gratitude to my father-in-law for his cooperation. Old Zhou understood immediately. Understood, young master. And the dosage of that wine? That's enough for him to pass away peacefully. Lu Chen closed his eyes, his tone calm and even. Don't dirty the place. After all, it might be turned into a memorial hall in the future to commemorate the Su family's past glory. The car slowly drove away from Jing'an Sanatorium, merging into the sparse afternoon traffic. Sunlight streamed through the car window, casting flickering shadows on Lu Chen's face, obscuring the true thoughts deep within his eyes. Only his slightly pursed lips revealed an unwavering resolve. The Su family's death knell had tolled, and the one who told the knell was on his way to his next destination. Jiangxing International Airport, the International Departure Hall. In the first-class lounge, Xiao Lin paced back and forth like a cat on a hot tin roof. His expensive suit was now crumpled, his hair was disheveled, the carefully applied hair gel had lost its effectiveness, and a few strands hung down his forehead, making him look utterly wretched. He clutched his phone tightly in his hand, the screen displaying several missed calls, all from Su Qinghue, but he dared not call back. All he wanted now was to get on the plane as quickly as possible and leave this damned place. Damn this crappy plane. Why aren't we boarding yet? He cursed under his breath, but afraid of attracting attention, he kept his voice down, glancing around warily every now and then. He felt like everyone around him was watching him, and every security guard could rush over and pin him down at any moment. That feeling of being constantly watched was driving him crazy. He remembered how Su Qinghue had been dragged away by those two men in black a few hours ago. He remembered Lu Chen's cold, emotionless eyes. He remembered Su Qingwan's face, which resembled Su Qinghue's but was even colder. It was all like a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. He thought that by climbing up the social ladder, by marrying Su Qinghue, he could live a life of luxury and even replace that good-for-nothing Lu Chun as the head of the Su family. But he was wrong, terribly wrong. Lu Chun wasn't a good-for-nothing at all. He was a wolf in sheep's clothing, a demon who devours people without spitting out the bones. Now, Su Qinghue is in dire straits herself, and he has become the sole scapegoat and punching bag. The enormous sums he embezzled, the assets he squandered, they are his death warrants. He must leave, he must take the remaining money and flee. He has acquaintances across the Mekong River. Once they're far from the reach of the emperor, even Lu Chun, no matter how powerful, cannot find him. Attention passengers. Flight MU731 from Jiangxing to Vientiane is expected to be delayed by 2 hours due to weather conditions at the destination. The sweet female voice on the announcement sounded like a death knell to Xiao Lin. Another delay. Xiao Lin slammed his fist on the armrest of the sofa next to him, wincing in pain and attracting the attention of several passengers nearby. He quickly lowered his head, shrinking back, cursing the airline's ancestors in his mind. 2 hours. When will this damn rain stop? What if Lu Chen's people come looking for him in these 2 hours? He couldn't bear to imagine the consequences. Frustrated, he pulled out another phone specifically for transferring money, checking the balance in his overseas accounts. It contained the US dollars and euros he had transferred from the Su Group over the years after its financial embezzlement. Although most of it had been frozen by Lu Chun, a small portion remained hidden in several extremely secretive offshore accounts, his last lifeline. Looking at the string of numbers, he felt a slight sense of relief. Once he was on a plane in Vientiane, and then transferring to an even more remote place, he would be safe. Just then, his personal cell phone vibrated again. It was an unfamiliar local number. Xiao Lin hesitated for a moment, then answered, lowering his voice. Hello? Is this Mr. Kobayashi? A slightly aged but unusually steady male voice came from the other end of the phone. The background noise was very loud, like a public area of an airport. Yes, that's me. Who are you? Kobayashi asked warily. Don't be nervous, young Master Lin. The voice carried a hint of mockery. Who I am is unimportant. What matters is that I know you're in a hurry to leave and worried that Lu Chen's men will find you. Xiao Lin's heart leaped into her throat, her knuckles white as she gripped her phone. What do you want? I'm warning you don't do anything rash. I have a lot of money. Money? The other person chuckled, full of disdain. Young Master Lin, the little money in your account is nothing to Lu Chen. I'm calling you to offer you a way out. Of course it's not free. What kind of way out? How much do you want? Xiao Lin asked anxiously. He was willing to pay money to avoid trouble as long as he could live. The way out is simple. Lu Chen's people are definitely keeping an eye on the security checkpoints and boarding gates. But you forgot that there's another place in the airport they might not be watching so closely. The voice said slowly, the cargo terminal. especially since there's a refrigerated cargo plane heading south tonight. Its destination not far from Vientiane. As long as you're willing to pay this amount. The other party quoted an amount not particularly huge, but for him, right now it was still a considerable sum. Xiao Lin gritted his teeth. A cargo terminal? A refrigerated cargo plane? It sounded risky, but it was better than sitting in the airport waiting area waiting to die. And the money they wanted was still within his budget. Most importantly, he had no better option right now. Okay, how can I find you? How will I pay you? Xiaolin lowered his voice and quickly agreed. Take your passport and luggage to cargo lane 3. Find a driver in blue overalls and a baseball cap, and tell him Lao Zhou recommended you to take shelter from the rain. Pay half before boarding and the rest upon landing. Remember, don't bring too much carry-on luggage, and don't attract attention. Also, whatever you do, don't tell your sister, or else you know the consequences. The call ended. Xiao Lin breathed a sigh of relief, feeling like he'd grasped a lifeline. He quickly gathered the expensive leather suitcase at his feet. It wasn't actually filled with clothes, just cash and a few pieces of valuable jewelry. He glanced towards the first-class lounge, a complex mix of emotions flashing through his mind regarding Su Qingwei, but ultimately the will to survive overwhelmed him. At this moment, self-preservation was paramount. He couldn't even take care of himself, let alone that bitch Su Qingwei. He pulled his hat down low, blended into the crowd, and quietly slipped out of the lounge, heading towards cargo lane number 3, a secluded corner of the airport. His heart pounded the whole way. He felt like someone was watching him. Finally reaching cargo lane number 3, he found a man in blue overalls and a baseball cap smoking at the entrance, his posture slightly hunched. Xiao Lin leaned closer and whispered, following the instructions on the phone, Master, Lao Zhou recommended this place. I'm here. To avoid the rain. The man looked up, revealing a wrinkled, expressionless face. He sized Xiaolin up and down, then said in a low voice, Stay close, don't look around, don't ask questions. With that, he stubbed out his cigarette and led Xiaolin deeper into the passageway. The passageway was dimly lit, filled with various cargo boxes, and reeked of engine oil and refrigerant. Xiaolin covered his nose, following closely, feeling both nervous and clinging to a sliver of hope. They passed through a series of iron gates and finally arrived at the edge of a huge warehouse-style hangar where a small, faded cargo plane was preparing for takeoff. The man led Kobayashi around to a cargo door at the rear of the plane and pointed to a mountain of white insulated boxes marked with the words cold chain transport. Right here. Go inside and find an empty box to hide in. I'll let some fresh air out for someone after the plane takes off. Once you get there, someone will meet you. Pay now. The man's voice remained flat. Looking at the dark cargo hold and the densely packed boxes, Xiaolin felt a pang of unease, but it seemed to be the only way out. He gritted his teeth, pulled a wad of US dollars he had prepared beforehand from his inner pocket, and stuffed it into the man's hand. The man weighed it in his hand, then stuffed it into his pocket, waving his hand impatiently. Hurry up and go in. Don't dawdle. Xiao Lin took one last look at the outside world, steeled himself, and climbed into the cargo hold, squeezing into the gap between several insulated containers. The space was cramped, the smell was unbearable, and it was cold, but he couldn't care less. He curled up, listening to the loud crash of the cargo door closing and the plane's engines roaring to life. A strange sense of relief washed over him. They're leaving, finally leaving. Lu Chun, no matter how powerful you are, you can't catch me now. The cargo hold was pitch black, with only the deafening roar of the engines. Xiao Lin felt the plane taxiing, accelerating, and then suddenly pitching up. A feeling of weightlessness washed over him. He knew the plane had taken off. He had succeeded. He had escaped Jiangxing, escaped Lu Chen's clutches. However, what he didn't know was that just before the cargo door closed, the man in the baseball cap whispered 2 words into a miniature microphone in his sleeve. All done. Meanwhile, in a monitoring room in the airport tower, Lao Zhou watched through a high-definition camera as the cargo plane smoothly took off, becoming a twinkling in the night sky. He put down his binoculars and said to a young man beside him dressed in uniform, but with a distinctly different demeanor, the target has boarded. As planned, to create an unexpected cold chain malfunction during the flight, causing a sudden drop in temperature. before landing. Have the local partners discover the body. The method must be clean and consistent with an accident. Understood. Mr. Zhou. The young man nodded and turned to give instructions. Thousands of meters above the ground, inside the sealed cargo hold of that cargo plane, the temperature was quietly dropping. At first, Xiao Lin just felt cold, then he began to shiver. And later, his hands and feet went numb. And his consciousness began to blur. He thought it was normal cold chain temperature and didn't pay much attention, just curling himself up tighter. It wasn't until he found it difficult to breathe and felt as if a huge rock was pressing on his chest that he began to panic. He desperately tried to call for help, tried to pound on the cargo wall. But his body wouldn't obey him. The cold felt like countless steel needles piercing his bone marrow. Freezing his blood. His mind flashed back to Su Qingyue's arrogant face, Liu Qin's icy gaze, and his own extravagant days. Finally, his thoughts settled on the stacks of green banknotes. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Only a white mist escaped his lips. His eyes gradually lost focus. His pupils dilated, and finally they froze in a deathly darkness. Hours later, when the plane landed at a tropical airport and the cargo hold door was opened, the porters found Xiao Lin curled up in a crevice of an insulated container, his body already stiff. The subsequent forensic report indicated that the deceased suffered multiple organ failure due to frostbite, consistent with an accident during cold chain transportation. A farce in a cold and absurd way came to an end. In Jiangcheng, the temporary headquarters of the Su Group, Liu Qin stood by the window, listening to Lao Zhou's report. The target had died of illness en route. Local media would report it as an accident. As for Su Qingyue, she fainted upon receiving the news in the detention center and was currently being treated in the infirmary. As for Su Jinhua, after signing all the documents, his condition deteriorated rapidly. Doctors estimated he wouldn't make it through the night. Miss Su Qingwan had arrived at the sanatorium. Liu Qin didn't turn around, only giving a faint hum. Xiao Lin's death, Su Qingyue's madness, Su Jinhua's demise. All of this was expected. He turned to look at the final audit report on Su Qingwan's mother's estate on the table, his eyes deep. Tell Qingwan that her mother left behind more than just shares. Liu Chan said softly, there's also a list of those who participated in covering up the truth and even profited from it. I'll give her that list. As for how she uses it, that's up to her. Old Zhou bowed. Yes, young master. Also, news has come from the Xinyuan headquarters that several elders have expressed their approval of your swift and decisive actions in Jiangcheng. But they remind you that the Su family matter has far-reaching implications, so you need to be mindful of the consequences and bring it to a close as soon as possible. The end. Liu Qin's lips curled into a meaningful smile. This was just the beginning. The Su family's show was over, but it was time to stir things up in Jiangcheng. He issued a notice. A press conference would be held tomorrow to officially announce that Xinyuan Capital had taken over all of the Su Group's high-quality assets and restructured them into Xinyuan Industry. As for Su Qingwan, let her attend the press conference as a newly appointed director. He picked up the pen on the table, twirling it unconsciously between his fingers. The nib reflected a cold light under the lamp. I want everyone to see who the new master of Jiangcheng is. And I want certain people lurking in the shadows to know that I, Liu Chun, have returned not to put on a farce, but to clean house. Outside the window, the city lights gradually illuminated, outlining a bustling yet complex landscape. A far greater storm was brewing beneath the seemingly calm night. And at the eye of this storm was the man who had just buried the Su family, yet possessed a profound and far-reaching vision. Jiangcheng International Convention and Exhibition Center, press conference hall. Flashbulbs swarmed like a bloodthirsty beat, frantically trying to capture every subtle expression on the stage. The audience was packed with reporters from Jiangcheng and even the nation's mainstream financial media, their cameras and microphones aimed at the center of the stage. Their two people sat side by side. On the left was Liu Chun. He wore a perfectly tailored black custom suit devoid of any superfluous embellishments, save for a subtle fleur-de-lis emblem on the chest. His posture was relaxed, leaning back in his chair, hands clasped in his lap, his gaze calmly sweeping over the audience. His composed aura made him appear less like he was holding a press conference and more like he was inspecting his own territory. The seat next to him, that which had originally belonged to Su Qingyue, was now empty and filled by someone else. On the right was Su Qingwan. She had changed out of her usual jeans and was wearing a slightly oversized beige business suit that Lu Chun had sent over, which made her look even thinner. Her long hair was still tied in a ponytail, and her face was bare of makeup, making her seem somewhat out of place in the sophisticated surroundings. Her hands were placed flat on her knees, her fingertips slightly white from the pressure, but her back was ramrod straight. This was the first time she had appeared in public as Su Qingwan, one of the legal heirs of the Su group. She could feel countless gazes scraping against her like knives, curiosity, scrutiny, questioning, and even schadenfreude. Mr. Lude, does the fact that Xinyuan Capital has taken over the original Su group mean that the Su brand will completely disappear from the historical stage? A pointed question was thrown at Lu Chun. Lu Chun slightly turned his head to look at the reporter who had asked the question, a faint smile playing on his lips. History is written by the victors. The Su group, due to a series of problems, including management misjudgments, financial fraud, and moral decay, has lost its value. Xinyuan Capital is taking over its remaining high-quality assets and will restructure them into Xinyuan Industry. As for the name Su, it carries too much shame and there's no need to retain it. His words were calm, yet like a knife chilled to the bone, stripping away the last vestiges of the Su family's dignity. A chorus of suppressed gasps and whispers rose from the audience. Mr. Lude, there are rumors that the current situation is due to a personal conflict between you and Ms. Su Qingwei, the former president of Su Group. Is this true? Mr. Lu.ms. Su Qingwan claims to be the second young lady of the Su family, but there has been no prior public information about her. How did Xinyuan Capital verify her identity? And why did they appoint her as a director of the new company? The questions came one after another, sharp and incisive. Lu Chun didn't answer immediately. Instead, he picked up his water glass, took a small sip, and moved with elegant composure. He put down the glass, his gaze sweeping across the room. His voice wasn't loud, but it clearly reached everyone's ears. Personal conflict? No, this isn't a personal conflict. It's a matter of principle. Ms. Su Qingyue's actions not only harmed the company's interests, but also violated legal boundaries. As for Ms. Su Qingwan's identity, we have already submitted the relevant legal documents and DNA test report to the relevant departments for filing. As one of the legal heirs of the Su family, she possesses corresponding shares, and serving as a director is a matter of course. He paused, his gaze shifting to Su Qingwan beside him. His tone softened yet remained authoritative. Ms. Qingwan, though young, is very resilient. Her past experiences have given her a deeper understanding of human nature and business. I believe she will become a qualified director of Xinyuan Industry, overseeing the company's operations and safeguarding the interests of all shareholders. Feeling Lu Chen's gaze, Su Qingwan took a deep breath, forcing herself to calm down. She raised her head, meeting the probing eyes of the audience, and tried to make her voice sound steady. Dear media friends, hello everyone. I am Su Qingwan. Regarding my identity, Mr. Lu said, there are legal documents to prove it. I don't want to make any more excuses about the past. Right and wrong will be judged by history. In the future, I will fulfill my duties as a director, ensuring the company's transparent operation, making up for the damage caused by the Su Group in the past, and creating real value for employees, shareholders, and society. Her speech was brief, yet more composed than expected. Many reporters in the audience looked surprised. This suddenly appearing second young lady of the Su family was neither timid nor hysterical as imagined. Instead, she possessed a unique calmness and resilience. However, at that moment, a commotion suddenly broke out at the back of the press conference. A middle-aged man in a cheap suit with disheveled hair, despite being blocked by several security personnel, struggled to push his way to the front of the stage, shouting, "I have something to say. Su Qingwan is a fake. She's a liar. Lu Chen, you can't cover everything up. The Su family's affair isn't over yet." An uproar erupted instantly. Flashbulbs went off even more frantically as many reporters stood up, trying to capture the sudden turn of events. Security personnel attempted to remove the troublemaker, and the scene became chaotic. Lu Chen sat on the stage, his face completely expressionless. He didn't even turn around to look at the troublemaker, but simply tapped the table lightly with his finger. The crisp tapping sound amidst the noisy background was strangely unsettling. Su Qingwan's face paled slightly, but she didn't panic. She just pursed her lips tightly and watched Lu Chen's reaction. Lu Chen finally turned his head slowly towards the source of the commotion, his eyes as cold as knives. He raised his hand and waved it gently. The security personnel who had been struggling seemed to receive a silent command, their movements instantly becoming swift and decisive. They practically dragged the middle-aged man away from the press conference hall. The entire process took only a dozen seconds, yet it exuded a breathtaking efficiency. The scene fell silent again, but the atmosphere became even more tense. Everyone waited for Lu Chen's explanation. Lu Chen withdrew his gaze and looked back at the reporters below the stage, as if the earlier incident had never happened. A slightly mocking smile curved his lips. It seems some people are still not used to accepting reality. As far as I know, that person was a former public relations employee of the Su Group, dismissed for financial reasons, and harboring resentment. This clownish performance is nothing more than a remnant of the Su family's downfall. Xinyuan Capital has always acted with integrity and can withstand any investigation. If any of you reporters are interested in his accusations, you can obtain the relevant case files from the police. Of course, I would prefer everyone to focus on Xinyuan Industrial's future development plans rather than this irrelevant noise. His tone was nonchalant, yet it carried an invisible pressure, if declaring, "This little storm isn't even worthy of my attention." The reporters below the stage exchanged bewildered glances, many quickly scrambling to take notes. Lu Chen's composure and assertiveness made them realize that the landscape of Jiangcheng had truly changed. The Su family was utterly finished, and the Xinyuan capital behind Lu Chen was a truly unshakable force. Su Qingwan watched Lu Chen's profile, her heart filled with mixed emotions. She knew that the troublemaker was probably more than just harboring resentment. Lu Chen rarely acted, but when he did, it was swift and devastating. That person's fate was predictable, and she herself, though sitting in this glamorous position, knew perfectly well that she was merely a pawn on Lu Chen's chessboard. Only this pawn now possessed its own will. Looking at the flashing lights below the stage, she silently repeated Lu Chen's words, "Create true value." Perhaps this was her new direction after her revenge? The press conference continued with subsequent questions focusing on Xinyuan Industries' business layout and strategic planning. Lu Chen handled the questions with ease and fluency, demonstrating the demeanor of a top business elite. Su Qingwan mostly listened quietly, occasionally adding a few brief comments when asked, behaving in a proper and respectful manner. As the press conference ended, applause was sparse, replaced by the clamor of reporters hurriedly packing up their equipment and leaving. Lu Chen stood up, straightened his suit, and extended his hand to Su Qingwan. "Well done. Let's go." Su Qingwan hesitated for a moment, then reached out her hand. Lu Chenshu helped her up. Their hands touched briefly and then parted, devoid of any warmth. "That person just now." Su Qingwan couldn't help but ask in a low voice. "An insignificant character used as a pawn." Lu Chen protecting her as she left through the side door said calmly. However, this also shows that the downfall of the Su family has greatly impacted the interests of some people. There might be some minor troubles ahead, but nothing to worry about. Remember, as long as you're in the open and I'm in the shadows, we can avenge the Su family bit by bit. But you must also remember that your identity is that of a director of Xinyuan Industries. Your words and actions represent not only yourself, but also Xinyuan. Don't let me down. Su Qingwan's heart skipped a beat, and she looked up at Lu Chen. His profile was somewhat blurred in the corridor light, yet it exuded an undeniable power. She nodded and whispered, "I know. I won't let you down." Stepping out of the convention center, the evening breeze carried a slight chill. A black Bentley Mulsanne was already waiting by the roadside. Lu Chen opened the back door for Su Qingwan, and only after she got in did he get in himself and sit beside her. "Back to the company, or to the sanatorium?" Old Zhou in the front row asked. "Let's go to the sanatorium." Lu Chen closed his eyes. It was time to send his father-in-law off on his final journey. "Qingwan, you should come too. After all, he's your father." Su Qingwan stiffened slightly, then replied in a low voice, "Okay." The car started smoothly, and merged into the evening rush hour traffic. Lu Chen closed his eyes to rest, while Su Qingwan watched the street scenes rushing past the window, that her heart filled with mixed emotions. The glory at the press conference, the impact of the rioters, Liu Chen's indifference and domineering nature, and the complex feelings she had for the father who had abandoned her, whom she was about to meet. All of these intertwined, making her feel an unprecedented exhaustion, yet also a strange, emerging strength. The Su family was now a thing of the past. Her future was inextricably linked to the man named Lu Chun and the behemoth named Chen Yuan. She didn't know where this path led, but she knew she had no way out. The carriage was silent save for the low growl of the engine. The last rays of the setting sun streamed through the windows, casting shifting shadows on their faces, as if foreshadowing an even more magnificent chapter about to unfold. The twilight at Jing'an Sanatorium has a deathly stillness. Outside Su Jinhua's VIP detached villa, several nurses in white coats stood with their hands at their sides. Upon seeing Lu Chun and Su Qingwan get out of the car, they all bowed deeply, in one daring to speak. The wind blew in from the mountain valley, swirling withered leaves around their feet. Old Zhou followed half a step behind Lu Chun, like a moving shadow. Su Qingwan wrapped her beige suit jacket tighter, her fingertips icy cold. She looked at the second-floor window with its heavy curtains drawn. It had once been the warmest study in her childhood memories, now a grave where her father was buried alive. Afraid? Lu Chen didn't turn around, his voice sounding unusually calm in the wind. No. Su Qingwan took a deep breath, her steps unwavering. I just find it ironic. He hid here, thinking he could escape the storms of life, but it turns out he brought them upon himself. Lu Chen glanced at her sideways, offered no comment, and stepped into the small building. In the living room on the first floor, the director of the sanatorium and the attending physician were already waiting. Upon seeing Lu Chun enter, they quickly stepped forward to report, Mr. Lu.Mr. Su's blood oxygen saturation began to drop half an hour ago, and his spontaneous breathing is weak. We've given him vasopressors, but the effect is not obvious. Understood. Lu Chen interrupted him and walked straight upstairs. Everyone get out. Except for Uncle Zhou, and no one else should come up. Yes. Yes. The dean felt as if he had been granted a pardon and quickly led the group of medical staff downstairs, closing the door behind him. The carpet on the stairs absorbed all the footsteps. Su Qingwan followed behind Lu Chun, listening to her own heart pounding in her chest. The moment she pushed open the bedroom door, a strong smell of medicine and decay hit her. The curtains in the room were drawn tightly shut, with only a dim wall lamp on the bedside table illuminating the emaciated figure on the bed. Su Jinhua lay on his back on the bed, his oxygen mask fogged up, his chest rising and falling very slowly, each breath seeming like a desperate effort. The wavy line on the monitor jumped weakly, emitting a regular beeping sound, like a countdown pendulum. Hearing the noise, he turned his cloudy eyes with difficulty toward the door. The moment he saw Lu Chun, his pupils contracted, and then his gaze fell on Su Qingwan behind Lu Chun. In those cloudy eyes, first came confusion, then disbelief, and then a layer of murky tears welled up. A hoarse sound came from his throat, like a broken bellows. He tried to raise his hand, but only his fingers twitched slightly. The faint, broken breaths leaked from under the oxygen mask, barely audible. Su Qingwan stood 3 steps away from the bed, motionless. She looked at that face, the face that had once smiled at her, and the face that had once coldly ordered her disposal. Her memory of her father's broad shoulders overlapped with the image of his car speeding away outside the orphanage's iron gate. Hatred, like frozen soil, was now pried open by this call, revealing a surge of bitterness that even she herself was unwilling to admit. It's me. She spoke, her voice a little hoarse. You let me come back, and I'm back. Su Jinhua's breathing suddenly quickened, and the heart rate line on the monitor spiked. He stared intently at Su Qingwan, as if trying to etch her image into his unfocused pupils. After several seconds, he finally managed to look away from her, turning to Lu Chun with an extremely complex expression, fear, resentment, a hint of pleading, and a trace of relief. Lu Chun walked to the bedside, looking down at him with a completely calm tone. Father-in-law, the play has reached this point. It's time for the curtain to fall. Don't worry. Xinguan is back that the Su family line won't end. What you owe them. Mother and daughter, I'll make her pay back. Point one by one. As for those things you're worried about. He paused, his voice low, but each word clear. Take you to your grave. It's for your own good. Fortune wants. Su Jinhua's eyes trembled. A single murky tear sliding from the corner of his eye and soaking into the pillowcase. He uttered a string of indistinct syllables, as if cursing or thanking someone, before finally letting his gaze return to Su Qingwan's face, lingering for a long moment before completely fading away. On the monitor, the wavy line that had been jumping around had been stretched into a cold straight line. Drip, drip, drip. The long tone replaced the regular jumping. The room was deathly silent. Only the sound of the wind outside the window could be heard, like some kind of suppressed sob. Su Qingwan stood there, neither crying nor moving. She simply stared at the taut line, the man who had once controlled her destiny and then pushed her into the abyss, who had ended so easily. A profound emptiness gripped her, as if the hatred that had sustained her had suddenly lost its concrete target with that long cry. Lu Chen glanced at her, said nothing, turned and walked out of the room, whispering a few instructions to old Zhou, who was guarding the door. Old Zhou nodded, turned, and went downstairs to arrange the funeral. Lu Chen returned to the room, and seeing Su Qingwan still standing there, broke the deathly silence. His last look was a warning not to hate. But if you don't hate, how can you survive? Su Qingwan slowly turned her head, her eyes slightly red, but without tears. She looked at Lu Chen, her voice low. You won't let me hate you? Hatred is a person's armor. Lu Chen walked to the window and ripped open the heavy curtains. The last rays of the setting sun flooded in, illuminating half of his cold, handsome profile. Without armor, you wouldn't survive 3 days in Jiangqing. But remember, hatred is hatred, but your mind must be clear. Su Jinhua is dead. Less than 30% of the revenge for the Su family has been taken. The remaining 70% lies with those who divided up the Su family, concealed your existence, and even participated in the murder of your mother. He pulled a thin brown paper envelope from the inside pocket of his suit and handed it to Su Qingwan. What is this? Su Qingwan didn't answer. A list. Lu Chen placed the envelope on the low cabinet at the foot of the bed. It contained the names of people who had entered or left the Su family home, that visited the hospital, that signed relevant documents, or later benefited from your mother's death. There were doctors, lawyers, old acquaintances of the Su family, and the parasites within Xinyuan. Before his death, Su Jinhua wrote down everything he could remember. It wasn't complete, but it was enough for you to begin with. Su Qingwan's gaze fell on the envelope as if it were a red-hot branding iron. Her fingertips twitched slightly before she finally reached out and picked it up. The envelope was unsealed. She pulled out the paper inside. There were only 2 thin pages, with Su Jinhua's messy handwriting listing a dozen or so names, followed by brief notes. Her gaze swept over the familiar and unfamiliar names, her breathing quickening. She remembered these people. When she was little, they came to her house for dinner, smiling and patting her head. In the hospital, they shook their heads at her mother with stern faces. At the funeral, they feigned tears. It turned out that every single one of them might be stained with her mother's and hers blood. Corruptions within Xinyuan? She raised her head, looking at Lu Chen with sharp eyes. There are people involved within your ranks as well. The abyss is too vast. It harbors all sorts of birds. Lu Chen's tone was calm, yet carried a chilling undertone. My mother's formula wasn't stolen by Su Jinhua alone. An insider provided the information. An outsider intervened, and it was a coordinated effort. Su Jinhua was merely a tool on the surface. Now that the tool is broken, it's time to find the hand that wielded it. He looked at Su Qingwan, his gaze deep. You take this list. How you use it is up to you. You can hand it over to the police, or you can investigate it yourself. But remember that before you have sufficient power, don't alert them. The parasites of the abyss are 10 times harder to chew than the Su family. Su Qingwan clutched the 2 sheets of paper tightly, their edges crumpled. She understood Lu Chen's meaning. This wasn't just a revenge list, it was a pledge of allegiance. By giving her this, he was both providing her with a clue to revenge and binding her to his cause. She would be dealing with enemies within Xinyuan capital. And this required Lu Chen's tacit approval and even support. Why did you help me to this extent? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Just to clean house? Or for your mother? Lu Chun was silent for a moment. The light from the wall lamp flickered in his eyes. He walked to the bedside, looking at Su Jinhua's face, which was rapidly losing its warmth. When he spoke, his voice carried a faint, almost imperceptible bitterness. Before my mother passed away, she held two lists in her hand. One was of the people who harmed her back then. The other, he paused, of the people who helped her. Your mother was on the second list. Back then, when the formula was stolen and my mother fell seriously, it was your mother who risked her life to secretly switch her crucial medication, extending her life by half a month. That half month was enough for me to rush back and stabilize the situation. I've always remembered that kindness. Su Qingwan was stunned. She had never heard her mother mention this before. So that amidst all that dark entanglement, there was still such a faint glimmer of light. So Liu Qin's help wasn't entirely out of exploitation. There was another layer of cause and effect she was unaware of. So I'll help you reclaim what's rightfully yours and investigate the cause of your mother's death. This is both repaying a favor to your mother and cleaning up the lingering influence of my mother's side. Lu Chun turned around, his gaze sharpening again. But the prerequisite was that you had to have the ability to handle it and bear the consequences. Su Qingwan, don't disappoint me, and don't let your mother die in vain. After saying that, he stopped looking at her and turned to leave. Old Zhou will handle the rest. You can stay here for a while, or come with me, it's up to you. Tomorrow morning, go to the company. There are some things to hand over. The door closed softly. Only Su Qingwan remained in the room, along with the rapidly cooling corpse on the bed. She looked down at the crumpled list in her hand. It then looked up at Su Jinhua's now calm face. The last rays of dusk had completely disappeared, and twilight engulfed the room. She stood at the boundary between light and shadow, as if standing on a fault line between the past and the future. The hatred remained, but it was now mixed with something more complex. The path of revenge was longer and more perilous than she had imagined, and she had already embarked on this path of no return. Downstairs, Liu Qin stood by the car, lighting a cigarette. The smoke flickered in the twilight. Old Zhou, having finished his business, approached and whispered, "Young master, everything's arranged. The news has been suppressed. The official statement is that Mr. Su is critically ill, and tonight is crucial." As for the list, giving her the list was the right thing to do. Lu Qin exhaled a smoke ring, watching the smoke dissipate in the wind. She needed a target, and she needed shackles. Moving any one of the people on that list would expose the internal conflicts within Xinyuan. Let her charge and we'll close the net. Perfect. Let's see which rats will jump out. As for Su Qingwan, he kept a close eye on her. If she was truly capable, he would help her up and make her a figurehead for Xinyuan Industries, a double-edged sword. If she was an incompetent fool, Lu Qin flicked away his cigarette, his tone completely calm. Then he would let her go to her grave with the Su family. The cigarette, was crushed under his feet. Lu Qin opened the car door and got in. The car silently glided into the night. At the second-floor window, Su Qingwan watched the red taillights disappear at the end of the mountain road, slowly clenching her fist. The list in her palm hurt painfully. Su Jinhua is dead. Her revenge has officially begun. And this time, her opponent will be an unseen behemoth. The next morning, the temporary headquarters of Xinyuan Industry, in the top-floor conference room. Su Qingwan sat at the head of the long conference table, the seat that once belonged to Su Qinghua. Now the table was spotless, with only a glass of water and the brown paper envelope she had brought back from the sanatorium. She wore the same beige suit as yesterday, her long hair still tied in a ponytail, her face without any makeup. But her eyes held a calmer sharpness than yesterday. Lu Qin wasn't there. He said he had something to take care of and told her to familiarize herself with the situation first. But Su Qingwan knew there were definitely his spies in this conference room. Since she entered, she had felt no fewer than 5 scrutinizing gazes, from the newly appointed vice president to the finance director, and the heads of several departments. There was curiosity, suspicion, and mostly indifference waiting to see her make a fool of herself. Why is the second young lady of the Su family who was parachuted in and whose origins are unknown sitting in this position? Many people have this question in their minds. Su Qingwan ignored the stares. She slowly opened a document in front of her which detailed the current assets and personnel structure of Xinyuan Industry. Her gaze swept quickly across the document, pausing briefly on a few familiar names. People who had appeared on the list before and now held important positions within Xinyuan Industry. Director Su. This is the monthly operations report. Please take a look. The newly appointed executive vice president, a middle-aged man surnamed Li, spoke respectfully, but his eyes held a hint of barely perceptible arrogance as he pushed a beautifully bound report in front of her. Su Qingwan didn't answer, but lightly tapped the table with her fingertips. President Li. I've seen the briefing. I'd like to first understand the specific progress in handling the several bad debts left over from the original Su group. Especially, she paused, then read out a name. Wang Hai, the former director of the purchasing department. Had the bad debt related to the Southeast Asian timber imports he handled been written off? Vice President Li's expression changed slightly. Wang Hai was the third person on the list. Wang Hai's father was part of the legal team that handled the hospital's aftermath of Su Qingwan's mother's death. And Wang Hai himself, 6 months before Su Jinhua's downfall, suddenly resigned citing health reasons and immigrated to Australia, reportedly taking a considerable amount of money with him. Director Su, Wang Hai has already resigned. The related accounts are quite complicated and are still under investigation. Vice President Li's tone softened, sounding somewhat perfunctory. After all, these were old issues with many implications and couldn't be rushed. Can't be rushed. Su Qingwan raised her eyes, her gaze piercing Vice President Li like an icicle. 37 million in bad debts had been on the books for almost a year. And this was what they called can't be rushed? Or was there something in these accounts that was inconvenient to verify? The conference room fell silent instantly. Everyone sensed the tension in the air. Vice President Li's face flushed red and then paled as he forced a smile. Director Su, you're new here, that you might not be aware of the situation. Some accounts can't be investigated so easily. Then investigate until I know the truth. Su Qingwan interrupted him, her voice not loud, but carrying an undeniable force. After the meeting today, I want to see all the original receipts, contracts, bank statements, and a copy of Wang Hai's departure audit report on my desk. I need a detailed verification report within 3 days. Mr. Li, you're personally in charge of this matter. If you don't handle it well, you'll be in charge of the security department's patrol posts. Her words fell silent. The conference room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Everyone was stunned by the new director's assertiveness. No one had expected that this seemingly slender and quiet woman would in her very first words seize upon such a tough issue and directly slap Vice President Li in the face. Vice President Li's face was ashen, his fingers clenched tightly under the table, but he dared not refute. He realized that Su Qingwan wasn't there to gain experience. She was there to get serious. Moreover, her targeting of Wang Hai was not merely to investigate a bad debt. Yes, Director Su. I'll arrange it as soon as possible. Vice President Li squeezed out a few words through gritted teeth. Su Qingwan stopped looking at him and turned to the CFO, Director Zhang, besides this account, I also need copies of all outward payment approval forms, contracts, and corresponding bank statements for the past 5 years exceeding 5 million. Additionally, copies of all former Su Group executives' accounts, especially Su Qingwei, Xiao Lin. And she looked again at Vice President Li, emphasizing each word, and then at Mr. Li himself, at his personal expense reimbursement details for the past 3 years, including overseas spending records. I need a summary within a week. The CFO broke out in a cold sweat instantly. This wasn't an audit. It was digging up old dirt, trying to skin everyone alive. He glanced at Vice President Li, whose face was so dark it seemed to drip water, but dared not object. He could only grit his teeth and agree. Okay, Director Su. A series of instructions were issued, and the atmosphere in the conference room became extremely tense. Su Qingwan was like a sophisticated scanner, silently bringing each person on the list under her scrutiny. She didn't directly present the list, but instead used the most legitimate and irresistible reason, checking accounts, to brazenly approach her target. The meeting ended in an eerie atmosphere. Everyone filed out, one daring to glance at Su Qingwan. The last to leave. Vice President Li turned back and gave Su Qingwan a deep look before closing the door, His eyes held resentment and a barely perceptible hint of panic. Su Qingwan sat alone in the conference room, motionless for a long time. She took out her phone, scrolled to the encrypted photo album containing photos and information of everyone on the list. She looked at Wang Hai's smiling photo, her fingertips lightly swiping across the screen. The first step had been taken. Although it was just an audit, it was enough to make some people restless. She knew that Vice President Li and his team wouldn't sit idly by. The upcoming audit would undoubtedly encounter numerous obstacles, and there might even be more covert sabotage. But she wasn't afraid. Lu Chun had given her the platform and the reason, and she was determined to muddy the waters and dredge out the stones hidden in the mud, one by one. Just then, there was a gentle knock on the office door. It wasn't the secretary, but old Zhou. Miss Su. Old Zhou remained as calm as ever, holding a tablet computer. Mr. Liu asked me to give this to you. It's about Wang Hai's asset movements in Australia, and some other related information. Su Qingwan took the tablet. On the screen was a detailed investigation report. It detailed Wang Hai's luxury mansion in Sydney, his several companies, frequent cross-border financial transactions. The information was astonishingly detailed. What made her pupils shrink even more was that at the end of the report, there were several encrypted communication record summaries showing that Wang Hai had recently been in frequent contact with an encrypted number, and the last location traced by that number was in Jiangxing, and it had a brief intersection with the IP address of one of Vice President Li's hidden properties. This is... Su Qingwan looked up at old Zhou. Mr. Liu said the list is static, but people are dynamic. Old Zhou's tone was calm. Some people think they're safe once they flee abroad, but they forget that the connection is always back home. Vice President Li seems to have close ties with his old classmate in Australia. This 37 million bad debt might just be the tip of the iceberg. Su Qingwan took a deep breath and gripped the tablet tightly. She understood. Lu Chen wasn't just watching. He was secretly handing her the knife. This report was the first sharp blade she used against Vice President Li and Wang Hai. It proved that Wang Hai's departure was far from normal, and it also proved that there was an unspeakable connection between Vice President Li and him. With this, the audit was no longer a simple financial matter, but could potentially involve criminal cases of embezzlement, misappropriation of funds, or even money laundering. Please thank Mr. Liu for me. Su Qingwan's voice was low but firm. I really like this gift. Old Zhou nodded slightly. Mr. Liu also said that some names on the list are in the open, and some are in the shadows. Those in the open can be dealt with through overt methods, such as auditing accounts. Those in the shadows require patience, and also special methods. He asked me to tell you that the door to the Xinyuan Intelligence Department is not completely closed to you, but the tools you borrow must be returned on time, and the tools must not know who is using them. The meaning is clear. Intelligence support is acceptable, but Lu Chen's direct involvement cannot be exposed, and the Intelligence Department must not know that Su Qingwan is using their resources. This is both protection and constraint. I understand. Su Qingwan nodded. She knew this was the most Lu Chen could offer. After Lao Zhou left, Su Qingwan looked back at the report on the tablet. Her gaze lingered on the encrypted number. Tracing this number might uncover more people on the list, perhaps even revealing the deeper hand that killed her mother years ago. But this step was extremely risky. If she alerted the perpetrators, the consequences would be unimaginable. She closed her eyes, and her mind flashed back to her mother's gentle face at the cold walls of the orphanage, and Su Jinhua's turbid tears before his death. When she opened her eyes again, only a cold, resolute gaze remained. Risk? She already has nothing left. What risk is there for her to fear? She picked up the internal phone on the table and dialed Vice President Li's number. When the call connected, her tone was calm and even. Mr. Li, I forgot to mention earlier that regarding the investigation report on Wang Hai, I need to contact the Australian police and tax authorities to verify the source of some assets. Please provide me with all of Wang Hai's contact information in Australia, as well as the addresses of his companies and properties that you know. Also, I suggest you proactively provide some details about your friendship with him. This might help you reduce unnecessary suspicion during the subsequent investigation. A long, deathly silence fell on the other end of the phone. Only heavy breathing could be heard clearly through the receiver. A few seconds later, the call was abruptly disconnected. Su Qingwan put down the microphone, a cold smile curving her lips. The fish has taken the bait. She knew that from this moment on, but she was no longer Su Qingwan, passively waiting for revenge, but a hunter taking the initiative. The first name on the list, Wang Hai, and the vice president Li behind him, would be the first blow she would deliver against the past. And this blow would inevitably trigger a series of chain reactions, ensuring that those lurking parasites would never sleep again. Outside the window, the sun shone brightly, and the skyline of Jiangsheng remained as vibrant as ever. But in a corner of this city, a purge targeting the corrupt network within Xinyuan industry had quietly begun, with Su Qingwan's phone call, its bloody prelude now underway. And at the eye of the storm, this seemingly delicate woman sat quietly in the sunlight, awaiting the struggle of her first prey. Vice President Li slammed down the phone. An expensive, custom-made phone slammed onto the Persian carpeted office floor with a dull thud, its screen instantly cracking like a spiderweb. His face turned deathly pale, his chest heaved violently, and a fine layer of cold sweat beaded on his forehead, not from anger, but from fear. Every word Su Qingwan spoke felt like a hammer blow to his heart. Australian contact information, company and property addresses, offering details of their friendship. This wasn't just an audit. This was a death sentence. He received a consulting fee from Wang Hai every year, and he knew perfectly well where that money came from. His special relationship with Wang Hai was something that absolutely could not be exposed. If Su Qingwan really contacted the Australian police and tax authorities, if those accounts were thoroughly investigated, he would not only lose his job, but he might even go to jail. Bitch. Su Qingwan, that bitch. She tried to kill me the moment she arrived. Vice President Li gritted his teeth, pacing back and forth in his office like a trapped beast. He walked to the liquor cabinet, poured himself a glass of whiskey, his hands trembling so much he could barely hold the glass, spilling the amber liquid and soaking his cuffs. He gulped down the strong liquor, the burning sensation rolling from his throat to his stomach. But he couldn't suppress the chill in his heart. He can't just sit here and wait to die. Absolutely not. He walked to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled an old-fashioned keypad phone from a hidden compartment, inserting a brand new SIM card. This was his secure line, known only to a very few people. He dialed a number, and it was answered after 2 rings. A deep, hoarse male voice, heavy with sleepiness, came from the other end. Who is it? It's me. Loudly, Vice President Li lowered his voice, speaking rapidly, something's happened. That woman Su Qingwan has her eye on Wang Hai's accounts, and she's even investigating things in Australia, demanding information from me. She's trying to wipe me out. There was a 2-second silence on the other end of the phone, followed by a cold snort. What's the panic? What trouble can a fledgling girl cause? Su Jinhua is dead, and Su Qingwei is in there too. What is she anyway? The goods themselves aren't much, but the problem is that she has Lu Chen backing her. Vice President Li said anxiously. Lu Chen handed Xinyuan Industry over to her. It's obvious he's using her as a tool. She's investigating Wang Hai now, and her next step will be investigating me. Old Zhang, you have to help me think of a way. You were involved in that money back then too. The man called Old Zhang was silent for a moment. Then his tone turned somber. Lu Chen is indeed a variable. However, he seems to be busy integrating resources and cleaning up the periphery lately, so he might not have time to keep an eye on a woman's little tricks. Su Qingwan, since she doesn't know what's good for her, let her know that some things are not for her to touch. He paused, lowering his voice even further. Old Li, on your side, cut off all contact with Wang Hai completely, cleanly. Don't have any direct contact with him recently. If Su Qingwan wants information, give her fakes.org. Stall. Also, I heard she's been investigating the personal expense reports of senior executives recently. Stir up the mess, make it impossible for her to investigate. As for Australia, I'll handle that. You're going to handle this? How will you handle it? Vice President Li's heart tightened. Wang Hai is a tough nut to crack, but not impossible to gnaw on. Old Zhang's tone carried a hint of cruelty. He'd suggest causing him some kind of accident. A car crash, drowning. Anything would do. As long as he kept quiet, Su Qingwan would lose her grip. A director without evidence couldn't cause any real trouble. Vice President Li's hand holding the phone trembled. Murder to silence him? This old Zhang was even more ruthless than him. But then he thought that if Wang Hai went to an Australian prison, that he'd definitely implicate more people in order to get a reduced sentence, including Vice President Li and old Zhang on the other end of the phone. Rather than waiting to be implicated, that it was better to strike first. Okay, I'm fine with it, but you need to hurry. Su Qingwan gave me 3 days. Vice President Li gritted his teeth and made his decision. 3 days? That's enough. Old Zhang sneered. Hold on. Remember that all contact should be through this number. Call and then discard it. Don't leave any loose ends. The call ended. Vice President Li.as, if all his strength had been drained, slumped into his executive chair, staring at the magnificent crystal chandelier on the ceiling, its light so blinding it made him dizzy. He had betrayed the Su family, siding with a new master, thinking he could rest easy. But the Su family had fallen, and his new master had sent a vengeful maid. Now to protect himself, he was forced to take an even more dangerous path, silencing witnesses, fabricating evidence, and resisting. Once he took that step, there was no turning back. He sat bolt upright, grabbed another phone from the table, and dialed his assistant's number. His voice regained its usual arrogance, but carried a barely perceptible tremor. Xiao Wang, come in for a moment. Get all of Wang Hai's files. I need to review them personally. Also, notify the finance department to suspend the review of all personal expense claims by senior executives until I give further instructions. And if Director Su needs any documents, tell her. We're compiling them. It'll take some time. After arranging everything, he leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes, and tried to calm his wildly beating heart. He knew this was just the beginning. Su Qingwan was like a thorn embedded in his flesh. If it wasn't removed, it would fester and rot. And to remove this thorn, blood would inevitably be drawn. Meanwhile, the headquarters of Xinyuan Industry, in Su Qingwan's office. She hung up the intercom, her face expressionless. She knew Vice President Li was panicked, and she knew he would never give in obediently. That call just now was less of a notification and more of a test, a provocation. She wanted to force him, force him to reveal a weakness, force him into a corner. She turned on her computer, pulled up the report about Wang Hai that Lao Zhou had given her, and carefully studied the information in the encrypted number. The IP address traced to Vice President Li's hidden property, indicating that their contact was very frequent, and that some kind of transaction might even have taken place at that property. Perhaps that even more important evidence was hidden there. But a direct investigation would definitely alert the enemy. A more subtle approach is needed. She picked up another encrypted phone and dialed a number. This number was given to her by Lu Chun through Lao Zhou. It was supposedly an external liaison point for the Xinyuan Intelligence Department. The call was answered quickly, and it was a young man's voice with a professional indifference. Who is this? I am Su Qingwan. She went straight to the point. I need a detailed report on all of Vice President Li's real estate, especially those purchased within the last 3 years registered under other people's names or concealed using special methods. Additionally, I need an analysis of all his communication records for the past month, including clues about encrypted numbers. Highest priority. Received. Identity verification completed. No further explanation from the other party. Su Qingwan recited a complex string of characters and a password. It was the key Lu Chun had given her. Verification successful. Task assigned. Report will be sent to your encrypted email address within 6 hours. Please check your inbox. The other party finished speaking and hung up the phone decisively. Su Qingwan put down her phone and let out a soft breath. With the support of the intelligence department, she felt like she had gained an invisible pair of eyes. Vice President Li's attempt to hide wouldn't be so easy. She opened her encrypted email, and sure enough, 0.6 hours later, a detailed report lay quietly there. Besides the known properties, the report prominently listed 3 villas and apartments that Vice President Li had purchased under relatives' names, but which he actually controlled. One of them was the Shanshui Manor, the source of the IP address. What alarmed her even more was the communication record analysis. Vice President Li's contact frequency with that encrypted number had surged in the past week, and there was always a follow-up contact shortly after each call with her. This almost certainly confirmed that Vice President Li was reporting to someone, and that this person was giving him advice. What made her pupils shrink the most was a note at the end of the report. The encrypted numbers communication signal had briefly accessed the internal network of the Xinyuan capital headquarters 3 months ago. Although it was immediately switched to the public network, the traces had already been detected. The headquarters of Xinyuan? The person behind Vice President Li is actually inside Xinyuan and at a high level. Able to use the internal network? Su Qingwan felt a chill run down her spine. The corrupt officials on the list were indeed more entrenched and vicious than she had imagined. Vice President Li was merely a pawn. The real danger lay with old Zhang behind him. And this man was very likely one of the key figures involved in the murder of her mother and the theft of the formula. She clenched her fists. The clues had finally led into the depths of the abyss. This step was far too dangerous. But she couldn't back down. This wasn't just for revenge, but also for Lu Chen. And for the woman who had once helped her mother. She picked up her phone, hesitated for a moment, and then dialed Lu Chen's number. The phone rang for a long time before being answered. Lu Chen's voice sounded tired, and the background noise was somewhat chaotic, as if he were in a car. "What is it?" he asked in a flat tone. "I've found Vice President Li." Su Qingwan tried to keep her voice steady. He had someone backing him, codenamed Lao Zhang. Communication records showed that the encrypted number had accessed the internal network of Xinyuan headquarters 3 months ago. "I suspect this person is very high-ranking." There was a few seconds of silence on the other end of the phone. Only a slight static could be heard. Then Lu Chen's voice came through a few decibels lower than before. "Continue investigating. But don't alert them. Old Zhang, I know who it is. This matter is more complicated and far-reaching than you think. Your current task is to solidify the evidence along Vice President Li's line, especially his financial dealings with Wang Hai. As for old Zhang, leave him to me." His tone carried a heavy, impending storm. Clearly, Yu Qingwan's discovery had touched a nerve in his internal purge. "Okay, I understand," Su Qingwan replied. "Also, I suspect that Vice President Li might target Wang Hai to silence him." "Okay, I've already arranged for people to keep an eye on things in Australia. Wang Hai is safe for now. But as for Vice President Li," Lu Chen paused, "he might target you. When you go out recently, have Lao Zhou's men accompany you. Don't go out alone." "I know." Su Qingwan felt a warmth in her heart, but her tone remained calm. "I won't give him a chance." Hanging up the phone, Su Qingwan walked to the window, looking at the endless stream of cars below. Sunlight shone on the glass curtain wall, reflecting a blinding light. She knew that a crackdown on Vice President Li and the forces behind him had quietly begun, and she was on the edge of the storm. The 3-day deadline is fast approaching. Vice President Li must be frantic, like a cat on a hot tin roof. His counterattack could come at any moment, and she must be prepared to face this first wave of backlash. She turned back to her desk, opened the drawer, and found a small pepper spray and a miniature self-defense siren inside. Old Zhou had quietly placed it in her car before she came to the company. She picked up the siren. The cold metallic touch calmed her down. "Su Qingwan, you are no longer that little girl who can be slaughtered at will. This time, it's either break the enemy's bones or be torn apart by their fangs. There is no third way." She sat back down at her computer and began to sort out all the evidence, preparing to present Vice President Li and his backer, Lao Zhang, with a gift that would surely give them a hard time at the second meeting 3 days later. Outside the window, darkness gradually fell. The city's neon lights lit up one after another, outlining a bustling yet dangerous silhouette. A war without gunpowder was entering its most tense, latent phase in this city that never sleeps. And at the eye of the storm, the seemingly fragile woman was quietly sharpening her claws, waiting for the moment to tear her prey apart. On the morning of the third day, I in the top-floor conference room of Xinyuan Industrial. The air was thick and heavy, like lead. The long table was filled with people, yet no one dared to utter a sound. Only the low hum of the central air conditioning vents amplified the suffocating silence. All eyes, seemingly unintentionally, drifted towards the person at the head of the table. Su Qingwan sat there. She was still wearing that beige suit, her long hair tied in a ponytail, and her face was bare of makeup. Several documents were spread out in front of her, and her fingertips tapped lightly and irregularly on the table. The sound was very soft, but it felt like tapping on everyone's heart. Vice President Li sat in the third seat to her right. his face ashen, dark circles under his eyes, and his expensive suit looked borrowed and baggy. He hadn't slept soundly for the past 3 days. He had cobbled together the information Su Qingwan requested, producing a heavily embellished false report, and then used excuses like under investigation and lost files to cover up the rest. He gambled that Su Qingwan wouldn't uncover the truth, and that old Zhang could smooth things over. But he lost his bet. Su Qingwan stopped tapping her fingers, raised her eyes, and her gaze, like a cold probe, pierced directly into Vice President Li's eyes. Mr. Li, the 3-day deadline is up. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried clearly throughout the conference room. I haven't received a single item. Wang Hai's asset list in Australia, his contact information, or copies of relevant contracts. The verification report you gave me is riddled with errors. Even basic bank statements don't match. What have you been up to these past 3 days? Vice President Li's throat was dried, but he forced a smile. Director sued. Due to the time difference in Australia and Mr. Wang Hai's lack of cooperation, that retrieving the data requires a process. That report is indeed what we can produce under the current conditions. Time difference. Su Qingwan interrupted him, pulling a piece of paper from the stack of documents in front of her and gently pushing it to the center of the table. This was the official reply from the New South Wales Police and the Business Registry in Australia, given to us yesterday afternoon at 4 o'clock. It clearly listed 7 properties under Wang Hai's name, 3 shell companies, and 17 transactions totaling $21 million between him and offshore accounts controlled by us over the past 2 years. The remittance path, receiving account, and even some antique transaction records used for money laundering were all clearly traceable. The paper felt like a red-hot branding iron, searing the heat that made Vice President Li's pupils shrink. He stared intently at the contents and the official seal, his blood seemingly freezing instantly. How could Australia have responded so quickly? And with such detail? When did Su Qingwan contact them? The flaws in that fake report were seen through at a glance, and they even delivered solid evidence back? This is a forgery. Vice President Li stood up abruptly, his voice trembling with extreme fear. Su Qingwan, you're framing me. You want to seize power, you want to bring me down. Framed? Su Qingwan sneered, pulling out another document. And this one? Shanshui Manor, Villa A. The property is registered under your brother-in-law's name, but you are the actual controller. In the past month, this IP address has connected with that encrypted number 43 times. And that encrypted number briefly accessed the internal network of Xinyuan headquarters 3 months ago. Vice President Li, should I read the technical tracing report as well? The moment the words Shanshui Manor left his lips, Vice President Li felt as if his spine had been ripped out. He slumped back into his chair, his face turning from ashen to deathly pale. That place was his and Lao Zhang's most secret contact point, never shown to anyone. How could Su Qingwan know? She not only found Wang Hai, but also that place, and even traced Lao Zhang's access to the internal network. This wasn't just an audit. It was digging 3 feet into the ground, uprooting him and all the connections behind him. The conference room erupted in chaos. Although most people didn't understand all the details, the keywords, Australian assets, $21 million, and the internal network of Xinyuan headquarters, were enough for them to understand what had happened. Whispers filled the air, and their gazes towards Vice President Li were filled with contempt, feared and schadenfreude. It turned out that this usually arrogant vice president was a mole who embezzled public funds, colluded with foreign enemies, and might even be involved in commercial espionage. No, it wasn't me, it was Lao Zhang. Lao Zhang forced me to do it. Vice President Li completely broke down, shouting incoherently. He made me contact Wang Hai, he made me handle the accounts. He made me use the internal network. Director Su, spare me. I know I was wrong. I'll tell you everything. I'll confess everything. He clung to the name like a lifeline, revealing old Zhang's identity. The moment that name was uttered, the conference room fell into an eerie silence. Someone called old Zhang, someone with such authority at Xinyuan headquarters. Everyone's minds conjured up one image: Zhang Wanshan, vice chairman of Xinyuan Capital's Risk Control Committee. A highly senior figure in Xinyuan, usually appearing dignified and respectable, an old man, even Lu Chen addressed as Uncle Zhang. Su Qingwan looked at the distraught Vice President Li, her eyes remaining completely unmoved. This was the name she had been waiting for. She slowly stood up, her gaze sweeping across the room before finally settling on the conference room door. Vice President Li, we will record your statement. As for Lao Zhang, she paused, her voice soft but carrying a sense of reassurance. You don't need to explain anymore. He's already next door. As soon as he finished speaking, the conference room door was pushed open from the outside. Lu Chen walked in. He was still dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, his face stern and his steps steady. He didn't look at anyone, walking straight to the seat next to Su Qingwan and taking his seat. Behind him, two men in black suits, both with sharp features, escorted in an elderly man with gray hair and a gloomy expression. That elderly man was none other than Zhang Wanshan. Zhang Wanshan didn't struggle or shout. He just stared intently at Lu Chun and Su Qingwan with his sharp, hawk-like eyes, his gaze filled with resentment and anger at being betrayed. Lu Chun, you dare touch me? I watched you grow up. Even your mother treated me with respect when she was alive. Zhang Wanshan spoke, his voice hoarse but carrying a powerful aura. For a Su family girl, for a false accusation, you dare to lay a hand on me? Aren't you afraid of alienating old ministers? Aren't you afraid of internal strife in Xinyuan? False accusations? Lu Chen finally spoke, his voice calm and even yet more oppressive than Zhang Wanshan's roar. Uncle Zhang. 15 years ago, on March 17th at 11 p.m. In the study of the Su family's old residence, you received a USB drive from Su Jinhua. It contained the core parameters of my mother's low-temperature extraction technology. On April 2, indeed, you received your first payment of $20 million from our competitor, Connor Group, through an overseas account. That June, my mother's condition suddenly worsened. The special medicine you tampered with prevented her from surviving the summer. With each word Lu Chen spoke, Zhang Wanshan's face paled further. He thought he had covered his tracks perfectly, that no one knew except Su Jinhua and the deceased Wang Hai. But Lu Chun not only knew he knew the dates, the amounts, and even the details of how the drugs had been tampered with. You're talking nonsense. Zhang Wanshan tried to remain calm, but his trembling voice betrayed him. Where's the evidence? Show me the evidence. Evidence. A cold smile curled at the corner of Lu Chen's lips as he pulled a transparent evidence bag from his suit's inner pocket. Inside was an old USB drive. This was taken from the safe at your Shanshui Manor. Inside, besides the Su family's technical data from back, were backups of your encrypted emails with the Connor Group. And your action plan for instructing Vice President Li to fabricate evidence of Su Qingwei and Xiao Lin embezzling public funds, attempting to frame the Lu family and trigger an internal purge. He gently placed the evidence bag on the table, making a soft sound. Regarding your mother's medication records from back then, when the hospital's internal monitoring system was upgraded last year, a deleted log was unexpectedly recovered, showing that someone had modified the drug dosage data with advanced privileges at a specific time. The privileged account was linked to your biometrics. Zhang Wanshan stared intently at the USB drive, as if it were a death warrant. He abruptly turned to look at the detained Vice President Li, his eyes bloodshot. You betrayed me? Vice President Li shrank back, avoiding eye contact, and could only stammer as he repeated, He forced me to. He made me do it. Ha ha ha. Zhang Wanshan suddenly burst into laughter, a shrill laugh filled with despair and madness. Lu Chen, you think you've won? You think you can rest easy after getting rid of me? Your mother was killed by us because she knew too much. The Su family, the Lu family, it's all the same. You're just another puppet. That real, complete formula isn't in your hands at all. It's in the hands of your mother's mysterious organization. You. Ugh. He tried to continue, but a man in black behind him deftly elbowed his chin, forcibly silencing him. However, the words mysterious organization and true formula still clearly escaped his lips. Lu Chen's eyes suddenly turned cold, but his expression remained unchanged. He looked at Su Qingwan and nodded slightly. Su Qingwan understood, took a deep breath, faced the crowd, and said in a clear and firm voice, Today, based on conclusive evidence, Xinyuan Industry has dismissed Vice President Li from all positions and handed him over to the judicial authorities for processing. At the same time that we have requested Xinyuan Capital Headquarters to initiate an investigation into Zhang Wanshan for suspected theft of trade secrets, bribery, dereliction of duty, and other potentially more serious crimes. All related assets have been frozen. She paused, her gaze sweeping over the trembling executives, her tone softening, yet carrying an undeniable authority. The past is past. From today onward, Xinyuan Industry will fully implement a new auditing and internal control system. Any actions that harm the company's interests will be severely punished. I hope everyone understands that Xinyuan needs not factional infighting, but hard work and loyalty. There are still names on the list, but the purge ends here. Past actions will be forgiven, but there will be no repeat offenses. If anyone doubts this, Vice President Li and Chairman Zhang are cautionary tales. These words, a combination of firmness and persuasion that demonstrated both swift and decisive action while offering a way out. In the conference room, many secretly breathed a sigh of relief, their gazes towards Su Qingwan now filled with genuine awe. This young woman had not only brought down Vice President Li, but had also decisively taken down a veteran like Zhang Wanshan. Her skill and the support behind her were unfathomable. Lu Chen stood up, taking one last look at Zhang Wanshan being led away. His eyes were like a bottomless, icy pool. Zhang Wanshan's dying outburst, revealing the mysterious organization and the true formula, pierced his heart like a thorn. It seemed his mother's death and the Su family's feud were far more complex and far-reaching than he had imagined. But at least the malignant tumor before him had been removed. He turned to Su Qingwan and said in a voice only the two of them could hear, "Well done. I'll handle the rest. Your mother's favor is repaid. Now, you want to stay in Xinyuan or start over?" Su Qingwan looked at Lu Chen. This man, cold and calculating, was also the only light on her path of revenge. He gave her a platform, he gave her a weapon, and in the end, he gave her a choice. "I'll stay." Her answer was unwavering. Half the revenge for the Su family had been taken. The other half was in the hands of those mysterious organizations. "I need Xinyuan's power, and I also need your power." She paused, then added, "Moreover, Xinyuan Industries is just getting started. I promised you I would take back what's mine and create real value." Lu Chen gave her a deep look and nodded almost imperceptibly. He turned and, accompanied by Lao Zhou and the man in black, strode out of the conference room. His back was straight, carrying a sense of solitude that came from having shed some of his burdens. Su Qingwan stood alone in the empty conference room, the last rays of the setting sun casting a long shadow through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She walked to the window, looking down at the city that had just undergone a bloody purge. Vice President Li was finished, Zhang Wanshan was down, Su Qingwe was still in prison, and Xiao Lin was already a frozen corpse in a foreign land. The revenge for the Su family was mostly complete, but the cause of her mother's death seemed to be shrouded in even deeper mystery. She touched the crumpled envelope in her pocket, a list left by Su Zhenhua. Some of the people on the list had already been brought to justice, while others were still at large. The mysterious organization Zhang Wanshan mentioned might be the source of the list. The road ahead is still long, but at least she is no longer alone. She took out her phone and dialed a number. It was a new number she had changed, a number known only to Lu Chen and a very few other people. "It's me. Check all the senior management changes at Connor Group over the past 20 years, especially those who had dealings with Zhang Wanshan. Also, I need all of my mother's work logs and lists of people she contacted at the Research Institute back then, the more detailed the better." Her voice was calm but firm. After hanging up the phone, Su Qingwan turned around and looked at the nameplate on the conference table that represented power and responsibility. "Director, Su Qingwan." She reached out and gently stroked the words. "The Su family is gone, but Su Qingwan remains. And Su Qingwan's future is destined to be intertwined with Lu Chen, Xinyuan, and those forces hidden in the shadows. The flames of revenge have not been extinguished, but have merely changed fuel. This time, she will no longer be a pawn to be manipulated, but one of the players." Outside the window, the city lights were just coming on, the night sky of Jiangxing both dazzling and dangerous. In Su Qingwan's eyes, this prosperity was reflected as well as the deeper darkness in the distance. The final bell has rung, but the new journey has just begun.